A widow is humiliated in an interview for taking her son, but the owner of the company was watching. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The January rain in Portland had a way of seeping into your bones, but Ilara Monroe had long since learned to weather more than just the cold. Standing in front of her bathroom mirror at 5:45 a.m., she traced the dark circles under her honey-brown eyes, remnants of another night spent soothing Anthony's fever dreams. Her reflection told a story of resilience, caramel-brown skin that seemed to hold onto the last traces of summer, even in winter's grip, natural curves that spoke of motherhood's lasting embrace, and thick, curly hair pulled back into what she called her survival bun. "Just another day," she whispered to herself, the words forming a small cloud in the chilly air of her modest apartment. The heating had been temperamental lately, another item on her endless list of things she couldn't quite afford to fix, but Anthony needed new winter boots, and her son's needs always came first. As if summoned by her thoughts, a small whimper echoed from the bedroom they shared. Ilara moved quietly through the dim apartment, her sock-covered feet silent on the worn hardwood floors. In his toddler bed, Anthony lay curled around his favorite blue hoodie, his light brown skin flushed with the lingering fever. "Hey, baby boy," she murmured, running her hand over his perfectly formed curls. His dark eyes fluttered open, immediately finding hers with that soul-deep recognition that never failed to catch her breath. At 2 years and 4 months, Anthony Isaiah Monroe carried himself with an old soul's quiet dignity, so much like his father that sometimes it made her heart ache. "Mama," he whispered, reaching up with small hands that still held the softness of babyhood. Ilara scooped him up, breathing in the sweet morning scent of him, letting his warm weight center her for what lay ahead. "We've got an adventure today, Tony," she told him, moving through their morning routine with practiced efficiency. "Mama's got a job interview, and you're going to be my brave little partner, okay?" Anthony watched her with those knowing eyes as she dressed him in warm layers, thermal undershirt, long-sleeved tee, and yes, the blue hoodie that had become his security blanket. She'd tried washing it once while he slept, only to face a meltdown of epic proportions when he woke. Now it went everywhere with them, a cotton blend shield against the world. The bus ride downtown was a lesson in invisible arithmetic, counting the dollars left on her transit card, the hours until Anthony's next meal, the minutes until the interview at Kane & Co. She'd seen the hiring notice online. Experienced barista wanted, competitive pay, benefits available. The benefits part had made her heart jump. Anthony's recent bout of ear infections had depleted their emergency fund, and the thought of having actual health insurance felt like a dream too dangerous to want. The Kane & Co. Cafe stood like a fortress of modern architecture among Portland's older buildings. Floor-to-ceiling windows gleamed despite the rain, and even from outside, Ilara could smell the rich aroma of premium coffee. Anthony stirred against her shoulder, his small fingers clutching her coat as they entered. The interior was a study in industrial chic, exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, and copper light fixtures that cast a warm glow over carefully arranged seating areas. Behind the counter, baristas in crisp black aprons moved with choreographed precision, their actions accompanied by the symphony of high-end espresso machines. "You must be joking." The voice cut through the ambient cafe noise like a blade. A woman in her 40s, wearing a manager's badge and an expression of thinly veiled disgust, stood before them. Her name tag read, "Patricia." "I'm here for the interview," Ilara said, straightening her spine while adjusting Anthony on her hip. "I'm Ilara Monroe. We spoke on the phone yesterday." "Yes, well, I wasn't aware you'd be bringing additional company." Patricia's eyes flicked to Anthony and then away, as if the sight of a child might somehow taint the cafe's carefully curated atmosphere. "This is highly unprofessional." Ilara felt the familiar heat of shame trying to climb up her neck, but she refused to let it show on her face. "I apologize for any inconvenience, but I'm a single mother, and my regular sitter is—" "This isn't a daycare center, Miss Monroe," Patricia interrupted, her voice carrying just enough to draw attention from nearby customers. "Kane & Co. maintains certain standards. If you can't arrange proper childcare for an interview, I can't imagine how you'd manage actual shifts." The words hit like slaps, each one calculated to sting. Around them the cafe had grown quieter, and Ilara could feel the weight of strangers' stares. Anthony pressed his face into her neck, sensing her tension, and she brought her hand up to cup the back of his head protectively. "I understand," Ilara said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Thank you for your time." She turned to leave, dignity wrapped around her like armor, when a voice, deep, firm, and somehow warm despite its authority, stopped her. "Actually, Patricia, I'd like to conduct this interview myself." The cafe fell silent enough to hear the rain against the windows. Ilara turned back to find herself looking up at a man who seemed to command the very air around him. Tall and broad-shouldered, he wore his obvious authority with casual grace. Dark jeans and a charcoal button-down rolled up to reveal strong forearms. But it was his eyes that held her, crystalline blue and startlingly kind. "Mr. Kane, Patricia started, her face draining of color. "Thank you, Patricia. That will be all." His dismissal was polite but absolute. He turned those remarkable eyes back to Ilara, and something in his expression softened. "Ms. Monroe, would you follow me? And of course your son is welcome." Stephen Kane, because this had to be the Stephen Kane, founder of the entire chain, led them through the cafe to a corner table partially screened by a living wall of plants. He pulled out a chair for her, and Ilara sat, settling Anthony in her lap. The toddler, usually shy with strangers, watched Stephen with open curiosity. "First," Stephen said, sitting across from them, "I apologize for Patricia's behavior. It doesn't reflect our company's values." He smiled at Anthony, who was still studying him intently. "That's a very cool hoodie you've got there." Anthony's small fingers curled into the worn blue fabric, and for the first time that morning he smiled, a tiny, precious thing that made Ilara's heart squeeze. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for both the apology and the kindness to her son. "I know this isn't conventional bringing him to an interview, but sometimes being a mother means making impossible choices seem possible." Something flickered in Stephen's eyes, recognition perhaps, or pain, but it was gone before she could name it. "Tell me about your experience, Ms. Monroe." "Ilara, please." She took a breath, settling into the conversation. "I worked as a lead barista at Coffee Culture for 3 years before her husband died, before her world collapsed, before single mother became her primary identity, before I took some time off for family reasons. I can make any drink you can name, handle a morning rush without breaking stride, and I learn new systems quickly." Stephen nodded, but his attention seemed equally divided between her words and Anthony, who had begun to relax against her chest, his eyes growing heavy. The fever was wearing him out. "He's not feeling well?" Stephen asked softly. "Ear infection," Ilara admitted. "He's on antibiotics, but they make him tired." Stephen's expression changed subtly, concern deepening the blue of his eyes. Without a word, he signaled to a barista, who quickly brought over a small pot of hot water and a selection of teas. "Chamomile might help him rest," he suggested, then added with a slight smile, "I find it works wonders during board meetings too." The joke, delivered so casually, startled a laugh from Ilara. It felt foreign in her throat, rusty from disuse, but genuine. Anthony stirred at the sound, lifting his head to watch Stephen prepare the tea with the same precision she imagined he brought to everything in his life. "The position is yours," he said suddenly, sliding the cup of chamomile tea toward her. "If you want it. Full benefits from day one, flexible scheduling to accommodate childcare and—" He glanced at Anthony, who had reached out one small hand toward the rising steam. "We can discuss having a dedicated space for him here when needed." Ilara's hand froze halfway to the teacup. "Mr. Kane." "Stephen, please." "Stephen." His name felt weighted with something she couldn't name. That's not standard policy, is it?" "No," he admitted, meeting her eyes directly. "But I've learned that standard policies often fail to account for extraordinary people." The words hung between them, carried on the scent of chamomile and coffee, wrapped in the gentle music playing overhead and the continuing pattern of rain against glass. Anthony had finally surrendered to sleep, his warm weight both comfort and courage against her chest. "When can you start?" Stephen asked quietly, as if speaking any louder might shatter the moment. Ilara looked down at her sleeping son, then back at the man across the table, this unexpected ally who had turned what should have been her moment of defeat into something else entirely, something that felt dangerously like hope. "Tomorrow," she said, and watched as Stephen Kane smiled for the first time, a smile that transformed his entire face and sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. "Tomorrow it is," he agreed, and in that moment, with the rain falling soft outside and her son sleeping peacefully in her arms, Ilara felt something shift in the universe, as if all the scattered pieces of her life were finally ready to form a new picture. She just wasn't sure yet what that picture would be. Morning light filtered through the windows of Kane & Co., painting copper streaks across the polished counters as Ilara adjusted her new black apron. Her fingers traced the embroidered logo, simple, elegant letters in metallic thread that caught the light like promises. First days usually brought butterflies, but today felt different, heavier, more significant. "Remember what Mama said?" Ilara knelt before Anthony, who stood clutching his blue hoodie in the small office Stephen had converted into a temporary play area. The space, though hastily arranged, showed careful thought. Soft floor mats, a small table with crayons and paper, and a comfortable child-sized beanbag that Anthony was eyeing with cautious interest. "Be brave," Anthony whispered, his dark eyes serious. At barely 2, he already carried himself with a gravity that sometimes made her heart ache. Like Daddy. Ilara's breath caught. They didn't often talk about Michael, her late husband, but Anthony had begun asking questions lately. Simple ones, wrapped in toddler logic, but each one felt like pressing on a bruise that refused to heal. "That's right, baby. Just like Daddy. He'll be fine." The voice, now familiar despite having heard it only yesterday, made Ilara stand and turn. Stephen stood in the doorway, his presence filling the small space without overwhelming it. Today he wore a light blue button-down that made his eyes seem impossibly clearer, sleeves rolled up, as if ready to tackle whatever the day might bring. "I had some books delivered," he continued, gesturing to a small shelf she hadn't noticed before. "The reviews said they're appropriate for his age group." He paused, something like uncertainty flickering across his features. "I hope that's okay." The gesture, so thoughtful and yet so cautious, touched something in Ilara she'd thought long dormant. That's very kind of you." "Kind has nothing to do with it," Stephen replied, but his smile softened the words. "Happy employees make better coffee, simple business logic." But there was nothing simple about the way he looked at Anthony, who had gravitated toward the bookshelf with newfound curiosity. Nothing businesslike in the gentle way he knelt down to Anthony's level, maintaining a respectful distance while pointing out a particularly colorful cover. "This one's about a little boy who builds a rocket ship from cardboard boxes," Stephen explained, his deep voice pitched soft and warm. "What do you think, Anthony? Would you like to explore space today?" Anthony looked up at Ilara, seeking permission in that way he always did, before trying something new. At her encouraging nod, he took a tentative step toward Stephen and the books. "Space," he repeated carefully, testing the word. "I'll check on him every 15 minutes, Stephen assured Ilara, standing but keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "And you can look in whenever you need to. The security camera feeds directly to the monitor behind the counter." Ilara wanted to protest that he didn't need to do this himself. Surely the owner of a successful coffee chain had more important things to do than babysit, but something in his expression stopped her. There was an eagerness there, carefully contained but visible to her searching gaze. "Thank you," she said instead, and watched as Anthony settled into the beanbag, already entranced by the book Stephen had shown him. It was the most comfortable she'd seen him with a stranger since Michael. The morning rush hit like a tidal wave, Portland's professionals seeking their caffeine fix with the desperate energy of people who needed to be somewhere 10 minutes ago. But Ilara found her rhythm quickly, muscle memory taking over as she crafted drink after drink. The high-end equipment was a joy to work with, responding to her touch with precision that made every beverage feel like a small work of art. Between customers, her eyes kept straying to the security monitor. She'd see Anthony listening intently as Stephen read to him, or coloring with focused determination, or even napping peacefully in the beanbag. Every 15 minutes, exactly as promised, Stephen would check on him, sometimes bringing water or a healthy snack that Ilara knew hadn't been there yesterday. "He's good with kids." The comment came from Lily, another barista who'd been quietly showing Ilara the ropes. She had kind eyes and a sleeve of vibrant tattoos that seemed to dance as she worked the espresso machine. "I've never seen Mr. Kane like this," Lily continued, keeping her voice low. "He usually stays in his office upstairs, watches everything through the cameras, sure, but..." She gestured toward the monitor, where Stephen was carefully covering a sleeping Anthony with a small blanket. "This is different." Ilara's chest tightened with an emotion she couldn't name. "He's just being considerate." "Honey," Lily said with a knowing smile, "Stephen Kane built this company from nothing into 30 locations across 3 states. He doesn't do anything just anything." The morning rush faded into the quieter lull of late morning, and Ilara took the opportunity to check on Anthony in person. She found him awake and engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with Stephen about the merits of different colored crayons. "Blue best," Anthony was insisting, holding up his favorite crayon with solemn conviction. "A compelling argument," Stephen replied with equal gravity, though his eyes danced with suppressed amusement. "But have you considered the versatility of green? Trees, grass, dragons." "Blue dragons," Anthony countered, and Stephen laughed, a rich, genuine sound that seemed to surprise even him. He looked up at Ilara's approach, and something in his expression made her pulse skip. "Your son is a master negotiator," he said, standing and brushing off his knees. "He's convinced me that all dragons should be blue from now on. He has that effect on people." Ilara smiled, watching as Anthony returned to his artistic endeavors. "Mr. Kane." "Stephen," he corrected gently. "Stephen," she amended, lowering her voice. "You don't have to spend your day here. I'm sure you have more important things to do." He was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on Anthony with an intensity that seemed to hold worlds of unspoken thoughts. "Sometimes the most important things aren't the ones on our calendar," he finally said. Then, as if catching himself in an unguarded moment, he added more briskly, "Besides, I'm reviewing our new coffee suppliers. This is as good a place as any to work." But Ilara had seen something in that unguarded moment, a flash of longing, perhaps, or loss. It reminded her of the way she sometimes caught her own reflection when Anthony did something that echoed his father. The rest of the day fell into a pattern. Ilara would serve customers, steal glances at the monitor, and occasionally check on Anthony in person. Stephen would alternate between actually reviewing business documents and engaging Anthony in increasingly elaborate conversations about everything from dinosaurs to the proper way to build block towers. As closing time approached, Ilara found herself moving slower than necessary, reluctant to break the spell of this strange, perfect day. Anthony had fallen asleep again, clutching both his blue hoodie and one of the new books Stephen had bought. "He can keep it," Stephen said quietly, noticing her attempt to separate book from child. "All of them, actually. They'll be here whenever he is." "I can't accept—" "You can," he interrupted, but gently. "Consider it part of your benefits package." His attempt at maintaining professional distance would have been more convincing if he wasn't carefully tucking the blanket around Anthony's shoulders. Ilara studied him in the fading light, this successful, powerful man who had spent his day making her son feel safe and valued, who had turned what could have been a humiliating situation into something that felt almost like home. "Why?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Why do all this?" Stephen straightened, and in the golden hour light streaming through the windows, he looked almost vulnerable. "Because everyone deserves a chance to rebuild," he said softly. "Because sometimes the things we think we can't have are the only things worth wanting." He cleared his throat, professional mask sliding back into place. "And because you make excellent cappuccinos, which makes you an asset worth accommodating." But Ilara had seen it, that moment of raw honesty that matched the ache in her own heart. As she gathered a sleeping Anthony into her arms, she felt the weight of possibility settling around her shoulders. Not just for herself, but for her son, who had spoken more words today than in the past week. For Stephen, whose carefully maintained distance seemed to crack a little more each time Anthony smiled at him. "Same time tomorrow?" Stephen asked, holding the door open for them. "Same time tomorrow," Ilara confirmed, and stepped out into the evening air carrying her sleeping son and the strange, warm feeling that maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't finished with her story after all. 3 weeks into her new job at Kane & Coas, Ilara found herself watching the rain through the cafe's windows, lost in thought. The morning rush hadn't started yet, and the pre-dawn quiet held a kind of magic that made her mind wander. She'd arrived early today, unable to sleep, memories of Michael playing through her mind like old film reels. It would have been his birthday. "You're here early." Stephen's voice pulled her from her reverie. He stood in the soft darkness of the cafe, coat slightly damp from the rain, looking less like a successful business owner and more like a man who'd also been chasing sleep without success. The shadows under his eyes matched her own. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted, continuing to prep the espresso machines. Anthony was restless too, almost like he knew. She trailed off, but Stephen's quiet "ah" told her he'd understood. Over the past weeks, he'd developed an uncanny ability to read between her lines, to hear the words she couldn't bring herself to say. "He's still sleeping," she added, gesturing to the security monitor, showing Anthony curled up in his now favorite beanbag, blue hoodie serving as both pillow and blanket. The office had evolved into a proper children's corner, with more books, educational toys, and even a small white noise machine that Stephen had noticed helped Anthony sleep better. "Children sense more than we think," Stephen said softly, moving behind the counter with practiced ease. He began making coffee, not with the automated machines, but with the pour-over setup he preferred during quiet moments. His movements were precise, almost meditative. "My sister used to say that babies are born with old souls, and it takes years for the world to make them forget." It was the first time he'd mentioned any family, and something in his tone made Alara look up from the pastry case she was arranging. "Used to say?" A muscle twitched in Stephen's jaw. "She passed 10 years ago." He focused intently on the coffee, watching the water spiral through the grounds. "Car accident. She was 24. Ilara's heart clenched. "I'm sorry. Thank you." He poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one toward her. "It's strange, isn't it, how grief becomes part of your DNA. Some days you barely notice it, and others. It feels like walking through water," Ilara finished, accepting the coffee. Their fingers brushed briefly, and she tried to ignore the warmth that sparked from that simple contact. "Everything is harder, heavier." Stephen nodded, leaning against the counter in a way that made him seem less like her boss and more like something she wasn't ready to name. "Tell me about him?" he asked quietly. "If you want to." The question caught her off guard. Most people avoided the subject of Michael, uncertain how to navigate the waters of her widowhood. But Stephen's eyes held only genuine interest, and maybe something like recognition, the look of someone who understood that sometimes talking about the lost was the only way to keep breathing. "He was a teacher," she began, surprising herself. "Middle school science. The kind who did crazy experiments that sometimes set off the fire alarms, but made kids fall in love with learning." A smile tugged at her lips, despite the ache in her chest. "That's how we met, actually. I was catering a school function, and he knocked over an entire tray of cookies trying to demonstrate centripetal force with a paper plate." Stephen's laugh was soft, encouraging. "Smooth." "He thought so." Ilara grinned, the memory warming her. "Insisted on replacing them himself. Showed up at my workplace the next day with 3 dozen homemade cookies that were absolutely terrible. But his smile." She took a sip of coffee, letting the rich flavor ground her. "I never stood a chance." "Anthony has his smile," Stephen observed gently. "I've noticed it when he's particularly proud of something." The fact that he'd noticed such a detail, that he'd paid enough attention to her son to recognize echoes of Michael in him, made Ilara's throat tight. "Yes, he does." The pre-dawn quiet wrapped around them like a cocoon, broken only by the soft hum of machines warming up and the distant sound of rain. Stephen seemed to be weighing something in his mind, his long fingers tracing patterns on his coffee cup. "I can't have children," he said suddenly, the words falling between them like stones in still water. "Found out years ago. It's why my last relationship ended." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Among other things." Ilara's heart stuttered, not from the confession itself, but from the raw vulnerability in his voice, the kind that came from sharing a truth you'd buried so deep. Speaking it felt like excavation. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it. "That must have been difficult to hear." It was. Stephen's eyes found hers, holding something that looked like gratitude. Still is some days. But lately, he glanced at the monitor showing Anthony, his expression softening. "Lately I'm learning there are different ways to matter in someone's life." The weight of that statement hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to voice. Ilara found herself holding her breath, aware that they were standing on the edge of something that both thrilled and terrified her. The moment was broken by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Lily arriving for her morning shift. Stephen straightened, professional mask sliding back into place, but his eyes lingered on Ilara's face for a heartbeat longer than necessary. The morning rush began in earnest, but something had shifted. Ilara felt it in the way Stephen's hand brushed her shoulder as he passed, in the soft looks he gave Anthony when he thought no one was watching, in the careful distance he maintained that somehow felt more intimate than closeness. During her break, she found Anthony and Stephen engaged in what had become their morning ritual, storytelling. But today's story was different. "And the brave knight," Stephen was saying, his deep voice gentle, "knew that sometimes the biggest adventures aren't about fighting dragons or saving kingdoms. Sometimes they're about having the courage to build something new from the pieces of what was lost." Anthony sat in Stephen's lap, a development that had happened gradually over the weeks, each day bringing them closer until it seemed the most natural thing in the world. He clutched his ever-present blue hoodie, eyes wide with attention. "Build new?" Anthony asked, his small hand reaching up to touch Stephen's cheek with the innocent boldness of toddlers. "Like Mama's coffee house?" Stephen's eyes met Ilara's over Anthony's head, and the look in them made her breath catch. "Yes," he said softly, still holding her gaze. "Exactly like that." Throughout the day, Ilara found herself watching their interactions through new eyes. She saw how Stephen unconsciously matched his stride to Anthony's toddling steps, how he'd developed a sixth sense for when Anthony was about to get overtired, how he'd learned to interpret Anthony's quieter forms of communication in a way few others had managed. It wasn't just kindness or obligation. It was something deeper, something that made her heart race and her hands shake when she let herself think about it too long. As closing time approached, Stephen appeared with Anthony in his arms, both of them wearing identical expressions of accomplishment. "We may have conducted a small science experiment," Stephen admitted, trying and failing to hide his smile. Anthony proudly held up a paper cup where coffee grounds and water had been used to grow small beans. "Garden," he announced, beaming with Michael's smile. "He insisted on using the premium Brazilian roast," Stephen added, looking both apologetic and entirely too pleased with himself. "Said it would grow better coffee trees." Ilara laughed, the sound surprising her with its freedom. The weight of the morning's grief hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted, making room for something else. Something that felt dangerously like possibility. You know," Stephen said as he helped her gather their things, his voice carefully casual, "there's a Children's Science Museum exhibit opening this weekend, all about growing things. Anthony might enjoy it." The invitation hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Ilara looked at her son, still clutching his coffee ground garden, then at Stephen, who watched her with that mixture of hope and uncertainty she was beginning to recognize in herself. "He might," she agreed softly, and watched as Stephen's entire face lit up with a smile that made her heart forget its careful rhythms. Later that night, as she tucked Anthony into bed, he asked her something that made her world tilt on its axis. "Mama," he whispered, serious as only a toddler could be, "Mr. Steve sad like you. Missing people." Ilara pressed a kiss to his forehead, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and innocence. "Yes, baby," she murmured. "I think he is." "We fix," Anthony declared with simple certainty, clutching his blue hoodie. "Like coffee garden." Ilara lay awake long after Anthony had fallen asleep, thinking about loss and growth, about coffee gardens and careful distances, about the way grief could carve spaces in you that might someday be filled with something new, something that felt like hope. The Portland Children's Science Museum buzzed with weekend energy, but all Ilara could focus on was the way Stephen's hand hovered near her lower back as he guided them through the crowds. Not touching, never touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him like a promise. "Look, Tony," Stephen pointed to an interactive display about plant growth, "just like our coffee garden." His voice carried that subtle excitement she'd come to recognize, the tone he used when sharing something new with Anthony. Anthony, perched on her hip, was uncharacteristically quiet, his fingers twisted in his blue hoodie, dark eyes taking in the chaos of children and exhibits with obvious uncertainty. The fever he'd fought off weeks ago had returned last night, mild, but enough to make him clingy. "Maybe this wasn't the best timing," Ilara murmured, feeling his forehead for what felt like the 100th time that morning. "We could try again next weekend. Or we could try something else," Stephen suggested, his eyes scanning the space before landing on a door marked Special Collections. He pulled out his phone, typed briefly, then smiled. "Being the donor of their new wing has some advantages. Come on." He led them through the door into a quiet hallway, then into a room that made both Ilara and Anthony gasp. The ceiling was a perfect recreation of the night sky, stars twinkling realistically above them. Interactive constellations hung at child height, and soft music played from hidden speakers. "Better?" Stephen asked softly. Anthony nodded, already reaching toward a glowing display of the moon phases. "Stars," he whispered, wonder replacing discomfort in his expression. They spent the next hour in their private planetarium, Anthony gradually warming up enough to explore, while Stephen explained the constellations in terms a toddler could grasp. Ilara found herself watching them more than the stars, the way Stephen naturally adjusted his pace to Anthony's, how he seemed to anticipate which displays would interest him most. "And that one," Stephen was saying, pointing to a cluster of stars, "is Ursa Minor, the little bear. Some people call it the Little Dipper." "Bear?" Anthony's eyes widened with interest. Like story? Exactly like the story we read. Stephen grinned, referring to one of the many books that had mysteriously appeared in Anthony's corner at the cafe. Want to hear the real story behind this constellation? Anthony nodded eagerly, and to Ilara's surprise, he reached for Stephen's hand. Stephen froze for a fraction of a second, emotion flickering across his face too quickly to name, before carefully accepting the small fingers in his own. Well, he began, voice slightly rough, a long time ago there was a mother bear who loved her cubs so much that Zeus himself, that's like a very powerful king, turned them both into stars so they could stay together forever. Anthony considered this seriously. Mama bear. He looked at Ilara, making the connection in his toddler way. Yes, Stephen said softly, his eyes meeting Ilara's over Anthony's head. A mama bear who would do anything for her baby. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things, until Anthony tugged on Stephen's hand. More stars? They moved through the exhibit slowly, Anthony growing increasingly comfortable with both the space and with Stephen. When he started yawning, Stephen smoothly lifted him up, and Anthony settled against his chest like he belonged there. I can take him, Ilara offered, even as her heart twisted at the sight. He's perfect where he is, Stephen murmured, and something in his tone made her chest tight. Unless, does it bother you? The question carried weight beyond the simple act of holding a sleepy toddler. Ilara studied them. Her son, who trusted so few people since losing his father, curled trustingly against this man who looked at him like he was something precious. No, she said honestly, it doesn't bother me at all. Stephen's smile was worth any uncertainty she might have felt. They ended up in the museum's quiet cafe, Anthony napping against Stephen's chest while they shared a plate of mediocre cookies that made them both laugh, remembering Ilara's story about Michael's baking disaster. He would have loved this place, Ilara said softly, surprising herself. Michael, I mean, he was always looking for new ways to make science accessible to kids. Stephen's free hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers, but close enough that she could feel the intention. Tell me more, and she did. For the first time since Michael's death, she found herself sharing stories that made her smile instead of cry, about his failed experiments, his terrible jokes, the way he'd sing off-key to make his students laugh. He sounds like an amazing father, Stephen said when she finished, his hand unconsciously rubbing circles on Anthony's back. He was. Ilara watched the gentle motion of his hand, thinking about how natural he looked with her son. You are too, you know, in your way. Stephen's hand stilled. Ilara, Ms. Monroe? The voice cut through their bubble like a knife. Patricia, the manager who had tried to humiliate Ilara during her interview, stood at their table with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. I thought that was you. Shopping on your day off? Her gaze flicked to Stephen, then to Anthony sleeping in his arms, and something calculating entered her expression. How cozy. Ilara felt her cheeks warm even as her spine stiffened. Patricia, yes, we were just enjoying the new astronomy exhibit, Stephen cut in, his voice carrying that quiet authority she'd first heard in the cafe. The one funded by Kane & Cover's educational initiative. I trust you received the memo about our company's commitment to supporting working parents. Patricia's smile faltered. Of course, Mr. Kane. I just wanted to ensure everything was appropriate. I appreciate your concern, Stephen said in a tone that suggested he didn't appreciate it at all, though I'm curious why you're monitoring our employees' personal time. The dismissal was clear. Patricia retreated, but the damage was done. The easy intimacy of the morning had shattered, replaced by the awkward reality of their situation. He was her boss, and people were already talking. I should get Anthony home, Ilara said, standing perhaps too quickly. His fever might be coming back. Ilara, wait. Stephen stood carefully, still cradling Anthony. Don't let her. She's right, though, isn't she? Ilara kept her voice low, conscious of her sleeping son. This isn't. We can't. Can't what? Stephen challenged softly. Care about each other? Build something real? You're my boss. I'm a man who. He stopped, adjusting Anthony's weight as the toddler stirred. A man who cares about you. Both of you. More than I probably should. The admission hung between them, honest and terrifying. Ilara looked at him, really looked at him, at the way he held her son like something precious, at the vulnerability in his eyes, at all the careful distance he maintained, except when it came to Anthony's happiness. I can't risk this job, she whispered. Anthony needs stability, health insurance. I would never let anything compromise that, Stephen promised. But Ilara, please don't use it as an excuse to run from whatever this is becoming. Anthony chose that moment to wake, blinking sleepily at them both. "Home?" he asked, but made no move to leave Stephen's arms. "Yes, baby," Ilara said, reaching for him. "Time to go home." The transfer from Stephen's arms to hers felt symbolic somehow, a physical manifestation of the walls she was trying to rebuild. But Anthony had other ideas. "Mr. Steve come?" he asked, looking between them with Michael's eyes. "Read Star's story." Ilara's heart clenched at the hope in his voice, at the way Stephen's expression cracked with naked longing before he carefully smoothed it away. "Not today, buddy," Stephen said gently. "But I'll see you tomorrow at the cafe, okay? We can read any story you want." Anthony's lower lip trembled. "Promise?" "I promise." Stephen's voice was firm, his eyes on Ilara even as he spoke to Anthony. "I'm not going anywhere." The drive home was quiet, Anthony falling back asleep almost immediately. Ilara's mind raced with everything that had happened: the perfect morning, Patricia's interruption, the way Stephen had looked at her when he said he cared about them. Later that night, after tucking Anthony into bed, she found herself staring at their reflection in his bedroom window. Her son slept peacefully, clutching his blue hoodie, and the astronomy book Stephen had quietly slipped into their bag before they left. On his nightstand, the coffee garden they'd grown together was sprouting its first tiny green leaf. Growth, Ilara thought, watching the rain paint patterns on the glass. It was always painful at first, but sometimes, if you were brave enough to let it happen, it could lead to something beautiful. The storm hit Portland without warning, turning the afternoon sky an ominous shade of green. Wind rattled the windows of Kane & Co. As Ilara wiped down the counter, trying to ignore the way her phone kept buzzing in her pocket. 3 missed calls from her apartment building's management, each more urgent than the last. "Bad leak in your unit," the latest voicemail had said. "Need immediate access. Water damage spreading to neighboring apartments." She glanced at the security monitor showing Anthony's corner. Her son was currently engaged in what had become his favorite activity: helping Stephen with paperwork. In practice, this meant Anthony sat in Stephen's lap, solemnly marking random documents with his crayons, while Stephen somehow managed to actually work around him. The sight made her heart twist. In the week since their museum visit, she'd tried to maintain professional distance, but Stephen had made it difficult, not through any overt actions, but through 1,000 small kindnesses that were harder to resist than grand gestures. Like now, as he appeared beside her with a concerned frown. "Everything okay? You've checked your phone 6 times in the last hour." "It's nothing," she started, but thunder cracked overhead with perfect dramatic timing, making her jump. "Just apartment issues. A leak. They need to access my unit, but I can't leave early, and my neighbor who usually helps is out of town." Stephen's expression shifted from concern to decision in an instant. "Go, take care of it. I can't just—" "You can." His voice was firm but gentle. "Your shift is covered. Anthony can stay in my office until you're done. We're in the middle of a very important business meeting involving dinosaur stickers." As if to prove his point, Anthony's voice drifted over. "Blue T-Rex best." Ilara bit her lip, torn between responsibility and necessity. "I shouldn't—" "Ilara." Stephen stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "Let me help, please." It was the please that undid her, the way his voice caught on it, like he needed this as much as she did. She nodded, and his smile was worth every moment of uncertainty. The storm had turned the streets into rivers by the time she reached her apartment building. The super led her to her unit, where water stained the ceiling in ominous patterns and dripped steadily onto furniture she couldn't afford to replace. 2 hours and countless phone calls later, Ilara stood in her bedroom, staring at the soaked mattress and waterlogged belongings. The leak had been fixed, but the damage assessment was clear. The unit wouldn't be habitable for at least a week while repairs were made. Her phone buzzed. "Stephen, how bad is it?" he asked without preamble. Ilara sank onto the one dry chair, exhaustion hitting her all at once. "Bad, we can't stay here. Water damage, possible mold. The building's insurance will cover repairs, but they can't start until tomorrow, and it'll take at least a week." "Where will you stay?" "I'll figure something out." She tried to keep her voice steady. "Maybe a motel or—" "No." The word was soft but absolute. "Pack what you need for the week. I'm sending you an address." "Stephen, I have a guest house," he continued, his tone brooking no argument. "Separate entrance, fully furnished, never used. It's yours for as long as you need it." "I can't accept." "You can," he interrupted gently. "You will. Because Anthony is currently explaining to me in great detail why dragons need rain boots during storms, And I think this conversation needs to continue somewhere dry and safe. As if to emphasize his point, Anthony's voice came through the phone. Purple boots, Mr. Steve, for jumping. Despite everything, Alara laughed. He's okay? He's perfect. Stephen's voice softened. He misses you, though. We both do. The simple honesty of it made her throat tight. Text me the address, she said finally. But Stephen, this is temporary, just until I figure something else out. Of course, he agreed too quickly. Just temporary. The address he sent led her to a neighborhood of elegant homes set back from tree-lined streets. Stephen's house, because of course it was his personal residence, was surprisingly modest compared to its neighbors, modern but welcoming, with warm lights glowing against the darkening sky. The guest house stood separate from the main building, connected by a covered walkway. Stephen waited for her there, holding an umbrella despite the covered path, always prepared, always thinking ahead. Anthony's asleep in the main house, he said as she approached, rain-soaked and uncertain. I thought you might want to get settled first, see the space. He trailed off, and Alara realized he was nervous. Stephen Kane, successful business owner and usually unflappable presence, was fidgeting with the umbrella handle. The guest house was beautiful, all clean lines and comfortable furniture, with a fully stocked kitchen and 2 bedrooms. The smaller one had already been set up with a toddler bed identical to Anthony's at home. When did you... Alara gestured to the bed, emotion making it hard to speak. I called in a favor. Stephen ran a hand through his hair, a rare tell of uncertainty. Was it too much? I can have it removed. It's perfect, she whispered, and watched as relief softened his features. Thunder rolled overhead, and Stephen glanced toward the main house. I should get Anthony. He's not fond of storms. I know, Alara smiled despite herself. That's why we have the purple rain boots, for jumping in puddles when we're scared. Stephen's expression changed, something like wonder crossing his face. You're amazing, you know that. The words hung between them, too honest for either to take back. Alara felt her pulse quicken as Stephen took a step closer, then another, until she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes. Alara, he breathed, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. A cry from the main house broke the moment. Anthony, likely woken by the storm. They both moved at once, parental instincts overriding everything else. They found him in Stephen's study, clutching his blue hoodie and looking small among the leather furniture and dark wood panels. But the moment he saw them both, his face lit up with such pure joy that Alara felt tears prick her eyes. Mama! Mr. Steve! He reached for them both, and somehow they ended up on the leather couch, Anthony between them, as Stephen quietly read from the astronomy book that had become Anthony's favorite. The stars are still there, Stephen explained as thunder shook the windows, even when we can't see them through the storms. Anthony considered this, his small hand finding Alara's. Like Daddy? The question hit her like a physical blow. Stephen's reading faltered for just a moment before he answered with gentle certainty, exactly like Daddy, always watching over you, even when you can't see him. Alara met his eyes over Anthony's head, seeing in them an understanding that broke her heart, and healed it in the same moment. This man, who couldn't have children of his own, somehow knew exactly what her son needed to hear. Later, after Anthony had fallen asleep in his new bed, clutching both his hoodie and the rocket ship pillow that had mysteriously appeared, Alara found Stephen in the kitchen of the main house, making tea. I should head back to the guest house, she said, but made no move to leave. Probably, he agreed, sliding a cup toward her. Their fingers brushed, and neither pulled away. This is complicated, she whispered. Life usually is. He moved closer, slowly enough that she could step away if she wanted to. She didn't. But some things are worth the complexity. The storm raged outside, but in that kitchen, with the scent of tea and rain in the air, Alara felt something shift inside her, like tectonic plates finally settling into their true alignment. I'm not ready, she admitted, but she let him take her hand. I know. His thumb traced patterns on her palm. We have time. A crash of thunder made them both glance toward the guest house, but the monitor on the counter showed Anthony sleeping peacefully, surrounded by his growing collection of books and toys that Stephen pretended not to buy. He loves you, Alara said softly. I've never seen him take to anyone like this, not since... I love him too. Stephen's voice was rough with emotion. And He stopped, swallowing hard. I'll wait, for however long you need. We can be whatever you're ready for us to be. Alara looked at him, really looked at him, at the man who read stories about stars to her son, who understood about purple rain boots and coffee gardens, who offered shelter without demanding anything in return. Standing on tiptoe, she pressed a kiss to his cheek, feeling him freeze at the contact. "Thank you," she whispered against his skin, then stepped back before either of them could do something they weren't ready for. She left him standing in his kitchen, touching his cheek where her lips had been. The rain had softened to a gentle patter, and as she walked the short distance to the guest house, Ilara thought about storms, how they could destroy, yes, but also how they could clear the air, make way for new growth, like the coffee garden on Anthony's windowsill, now sprouting its second leaf, like her heart, slowly learning to trust again, like love, growing in the spaces between fear and hope, between what was and what could be, simple, complicated, temporary, eternal, all of it swirling together like cream in coffee, creating something entirely new. Living in Stephen's guest house was an exercise in constant awareness of his proximity just across the garden, of the way Anthony lit up every morning knowing Mr. Steve was just steps away, of how domestic it felt when they'd cross paths in the early hours. Stephen heading to the cafe, Ilara preparing Anthony's breakfast. It had been 5 days since the storm, and Ilara was starting to forget what it felt like to not have Stephen woven into the fabric of their daily life. "Coffee's ready," he called from his kitchen, where she'd started joining him for their pre-work ritual. Anthony sat at the counter, happily munching on the whole-grain waffles Stephen had somehow known to stock. "More, please?" Anthony held up his plate, his smile a mirror of Michael's that made her heart squeeze. "What do we say?" Stephen prompted gently, already reaching for the waffle maker. "More, please, thank you." Anthony's manners had improved dramatically under Stephen's patient guidance. Ilara watched them, trying to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. Stephen moved around his kitchen with easy grace, dressed for work in charcoal slacks and a blue button-down that made his eyes look like summer sky. He'd rolled up his sleeves to cook, and she found herself following the movement of his forearms as he poured batter into the waffle maker. "You're staring," he murmured as he passed her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and warm, like cedar and coffee. "You're cooking," she countered, accepting the coffee he offered. "In a 3-piece suit, 2-piece. The vest is optional." His smile was playful, but his eyes held something deeper when they met hers. "And I like cooking for my family." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Before Ilara could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from her building manager. "Repairs are delayed," she said, scanning the message. "At least another week before we can move back." She expected disappointment or frustration to flood her at the news. Instead, she felt something dangerously close to relief. "Stay," Stephen said quietly, his attention seemingly focused on perfecting Anthony's waffle. "As long as you need." Steve. The nickname slipped out before she could catch it. His head snapped up, eyes darkening at the informal address. "Yes?" His voice was rough, and she watched his knuckles whiten on the counter's edge. "Done," Anthony announced, breaking the moment. He held up his empty plate proudly. "Work now? Help Mr. Steve?" It had become their routine, Anthony helping at the cafe, which really meant spending mornings in his special corner while Stephen and Ilara worked. But today was different. "Actually, buddy," Stephen said, kneeling to Anthony's level, "I have a surprise. Remember Miss Lily from the cafe? She has a daughter your age, and they're going to the children's center today. Would you like to go play?" Anthony's eyes widened. He looked at Ilara, seeking permission and reassurance. "Mama, too?" "Mama has to work," Stephen explained gently, "but I arranged for you to have a play date. Make some friends your age, and we'll all have dinner together after, okay?" Ilara felt her throat tighten at the careful way he'd planned this, how he'd thought about Anthony's need for socialization with peers. It was the kind of thing Michael would have done, putting their son's development first. "You didn't have to do that," she said later, after Anthony had left with an excited Lily and her daughter Winter. "I wanted to." Stephen's hand found the small of her back as they walked into the cafe, not quite touching but close enough to feel the heat of him. "He needs friends his age, and," he hesitated, "we need to talk." Fear flickered through her chest. "About?" But before he could answer, Patricia's voice cut through the morning quiet. "Mr. Kane, the board members are here. Early." Stephen's expression shifted, professional mask sliding into place. "They weren't supposed to arrive until next week." "Emergency meeting," Patricia said, her eyes sliding to Ilara with poorly concealed satisfaction, "about certain concerns that have been raised." The implications were clear in her tone. Ilara felt her cheeks burn as she moved behind the counter, trying to look busy and uninvolved. "My office." Stephen's voice was cold in a way she'd never heard. "Now." The morning passed in a blur of tension. Through the security monitor, Ilara could see figures moving in Stephen's office. Serious-looking men and women in expensive suits. Their voices sometimes carried through the closed door, words like inappropriate and liability making her stomach churn. Around noon, the board members filed out. One of them, an elegant woman with steel-grey hair, paused at the counter. "Vanilla latte," she ordered, studying Ilara with uncomfortably sharp eyes. "You're her, then?" Ilara straightened her spine. "I'm the barista, yes." The woman's lips curved slightly. "You know, I've known Stephen since he was in college. Never seen him fight for anything the way he fought for you today." She accepted her latte with a nod. "Don't waste it." Before Ilara could respond, the woman was gone, leaving her with more questions than answers. Stephen emerged from his office looking exhausted but somehow lighter. He made his way to the counter, accepting the coffee Ilara had waiting for him. "We need to talk," he said again, but this time his voice held something like hope. "Dinner? After we pick up Anthony?" The rest of the day crawled by. Ilara's mind raced with possibilities, with fears and hopes she didn't dare name. When they finally picked up Anthony from the children's center, he was bubbling with excitement about his new friend Winter and their adventures. "And we painted," he announced over dinner, which Stephen had arranged in his kitchen rather than the guest house. "Blue flowers for Mama." "That's beautiful, baby," Ilara smiled, watching as he fought to keep his eyes open between bites. The big day had worn him out. "I think someone's ready for bed," Stephen observed softly. "Want me to take him over?" Ilara nodded, watching as Stephen scooped up a sleepy Anthony with practiced ease. Her son immediately curled into him, small fingers clutching Stephen's shirt as they disappeared toward the guest house. When Stephen returned, he was carrying 2 glasses of wine and an expression that made her pulse quicken. "They tried to force me to end it," he said without preamble, setting the glasses down. "The board. They said having a relationship with an employee was inappropriate, a liability." Ilara's heart sank. "Stephen, so I stepped down as CEO." The words hung in the air between them. Ilara stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You what?" "I'm still the majority shareholder," he continued, moving closer. "Still on the board, but I'm no longer your boss. I appointed Diane, the woman who ordered the latte, as CEO. She's more qualified anyway, been running operations for years while I played at being in charge. You can't just—" Ilara shook her head, trying to process. "Your company is just a company." His hand found her face, thumb brushing her cheek with aching tenderness. What we're building here, this is everything." "Steve," she whispered, and felt him shudder at the nickname. "I love him," he said roughly. "Anthony, I love him like he's my own. And you?" His forehead pressed against hers. "You're in every cup of coffee I make, every story I read, every moment of every day. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I needed you to know that I choose this. I choose you both." Ilara felt tears slip down her cheeks. "It's too much. You're giving up too much." "I'm not giving up anything." His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. "I'm gaining everything." The kiss, when it finally came, tasted like coffee and truth and possibility. His lips were soft against hers, careful, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, she wound her arms around his neck and pulled him closer. They broke apart at the sound of small feet on hardwood. Anthony stood in the doorway, clutching his blue hoodie and rubbing his eyes. "Bad dream," he mumbled, and they both moved toward him instinctively. "Want to tell us about it?" Stephen asked, lifting him up as Ilara stroked his curls. Anthony shook his head, burrowing into Stephen's chest. "Stay? Both stay?" Ilara met Stephen's eyes over their son's head. And yes, she realized, that's what Anthony had become to him, their son. The thought should have terrified her, should have sent her running. Instead, it felt like coming home. "We'll stay," she promised, and watched Stephen's eyes fill with tears as Anthony reached for her hand. They ended up on Stephen's couch, Anthony sleeping between them while a soft rain began to fall outside. Like that first night of the storm, but different now. Better. "I love you," Stephen whispered into the quiet, his hand finding hers over Anthony's sleeping form. "Both of you. So much it terrifies me." Ilara squeezed his hand, watching their joined fingers rise and fall with Anthony's peaceful breathing. "I'm not ready to say it back," she admitted. "Not yet. But She met his eyes in the dim light. "I'm ready to try, to build something new." His smile was worth every moment of fear, every careful step that had led them here. "That's all I need," he murmured, and she knew it was true. Knew that this man, who had given up power and position just to love them properly, would wait forever if that's what she needed. But looking at him now, at the way he cradled their sleeping son while holding her hand like it was something precious, Ilara didn't think she'd need forever. Just time, just trust, just the courage to let love grow, one moment at a time, like a coffee garden reaching toward the light. Dawn painted Stephen's kitchen in shades of gold, but Ilara barely noticed the sunrise. She was too focused on the small box in her hands, a box she'd pulled from the depths of her belongings while packing to return to her apartment, now finally repaired after 2 weeks. Inside lay Michael's wedding ring, still on its chain, still carrying the weight of promises and memories. "Mama?" Anthony's voice drew her attention. He stood in the doorway of Stephen's kitchen, blue hoodie twisted in his small hands. "Sad?" "No, baby." She smiled, though her eyes felt damp. "Just remembering." Anthony padded over in his rocket ship pajamas, another gift from Stephen, and climbed into her lap. His small fingers reached for the ring, touching it with surprising gentleness. "Daddy's?" he asked, and Ilara's heart clenched at how much understanding lived in those dark eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. Daddy's ring. Keep it safe?" Anthony's question held layers of meaning that someone so young shouldn't have to understand. "Always," she promised, pressing a kiss to his curls. "We'll always keep Daddy in our hearts. And Mr. Steve, too?" The innocent question hung in the air just as Stephen appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day but frozen at Anthony's words. Their eyes met over their son's head, and Ilara saw her own complex emotions reflected in Stephen's face. "Mr. Steve has his own special place," she said carefully, watching Stephen's expression soften. "Different from Daddy's, but just as important." Anthony seemed satisfied with this answer, sliding off her lap to greet Stephen with his usual enthusiasm. "Morning. Waffles?" "Of course, buddy." Stephen scooped him up, but his eyes never left Ilara's. "Why don't you help me mix the batter?" Ilara watched them work together, their movements choreographed by weeks of shared mornings. Stephen had learned all of Anthony's little preferences, the way he liked his waffles cut into precise triangles, how he needed his juice in the blue cup with the rocket ships. "Found something?" Stephen asked softly, when Anthony was occupied with his breakfast. Ilara held up the chain with Michael's ring, was going through boxes deciding what to pack. Understanding dawned in Stephen's eyes. Right. The move back. The return to normal life. Away from this bubble they'd created in his home. Away from shared breakfasts and bedtime stories and the quiet moments that had begun to feel like forever. "You don't have to," he started. "We need to," she interrupted gently. "You know we do." He nodded, but she saw the shadow cross his face. "At least let me help you move, and maybe—" He hesitated. "Maybe we could talk about what comes next. For us." The question carried weight, like clouds heavy with rain. Before she could respond, Anthony's voice cut through the tension. "Mr. Steve sad too?" he asked, abandoning his waffles to pat Stephen's hand with sticky fingers. Stephen caught those small fingers in his own, pressing a kiss to them that made Ilara's heart twist. "No, buddy. Just thinking about how much I'll miss our breakfast talks." "Still see you," Anthony said with the simple certainty of children. "Still family." The word hung between them like a prayer. Stephen's eyes met Ilara's, full of questions he wouldn't ask, hopes he was trying not to hold too tightly. "Still family," Ilara confirmed softly, and watched as something in Stephen's expression broke open with joy. Later that morning, as they packed boxes in the guest house, Stephen broached the subject again. "Move in with me," he said suddenly, setting down a box of Anthony's books, which had somehow multiplied during their stay. "Steve, not here. Not if you're not ready." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she'd come to love. "I have another property. A house not far from Anthony's preschool, 3 bedrooms, big yard, space for a garden. It needs some work, but—" He took a breath. "It could be ours. Something we build together." Ilara sat on the edge of the bed, Michael's ring still heavy in her pocket. "It's too soon." "Is it?" He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "I've loved you both since that first day in the cafe. Since Anthony looked at me with Michael's eyes, and you stood there with all that quiet strength. I know it's complicated. I know there's history and memory and grief, but Ilara—" His thumbs traced patterns on her palms. "Life is short. Michael taught you that. My sister taught me that. Sometimes love is the only thing worth rushing into. I'd have to sell my apartment, she said, surprising herself. Hope flickered in Stephen's eyes. Yes, Anthony would need time to adjust. Of course. And I'd want to contribute, pay my share. Stephen's lips quirked. I assumed you'd insist on that. And she pulled Michael's ring from her pocket. This comes with us, somewhere Anthony can see it, remember him. We'll build a special shelf, Stephen said immediately, in Anthony's room, for the ring and pictures and anything else that helps him keep his father's memory alive. Tears spilled down Ilara's cheeks. You're impossible, you know that. I'm in love, he corrected, reaching up to brush away her tears. With you, with our son, with the life we could build together. Our son. The words echoed in her heart, fitting perfectly into spaces she thought would stay empty forever. Show me, she whispered. The house? Everything. They spent the afternoon exploring the property Stephen had mentioned, a craftsman-style home with good bones and better potential. Anthony ran through empty rooms, his excitement filling the space with life and possibility. Blue room, he declared, standing in what would be his bedroom. Like sky. We can do that, Stephen agreed, watching as Anthony explored the window seat. And maybe build some bookshelves for all your stories? And Daddy's special shelf? Anthony asked, showing that uncanny perception that sometimes took Ilara's breath away. Right here, Stephen said softly, indicating a sunny corner, where you can see it every morning. Remember all the love that brought you here. Ilara watched them from the doorway, her heart so full it hurt. Stephen had already planned everything, not just the practical details, but the emotional ones, the way to honor Michael's memory while building something new. Later, after Anthony had fallen asleep in the car ride home, exhausted from exploring their potential future, Ilara finally voiced the fear that had been growing all day. What if I'm not ready? She whispered as Stephen drove through the quiet streets. What if I never am? He was quiet for a moment, streetlights painting his profile in golden shadow. Then we wait, he said simply. We take it slow. Keep the guest house arrangement, or find something else that works. I'm not going anywhere, Ilara. Whether it takes weeks or months or years, I'll be here. She reached across the console to take his hand, remembering another car ride 2 years ago when her world had shattered with a single phone call about Michael. I can't lose anyone else, she admitted, the words barely audible. Stephen brought their joined hands to his lips. Then I'll just have to stick around, all of us, together. In the back seat, Anthony stirred just enough to mumble, family. And sitting there, holding Stephen's hand while their son slept peacefully behind them, Ilara felt something settle in her soul, like puzzle pieces clicking into place, like the first sip of perfect coffee, like coming home after a long journey. Yes, she said, squeezing Stephen's hand. Show me the paperwork tomorrow for the house. His smile lit up the darkness, brighter than any streetlight. Really? Really? She looked back at Anthony, then at their joined hands. It's time to build something new, together. They drove the rest of the way in comfortable silence, but Ilara's mind was full of possibilities. Blue rooms and garden plans, shared meals and bedtime stories, a shelf for Michael's memory and space for new love to grow. It wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations, moments of doubt, days when grief would feel heavier than hope. But looking at Stephen's profile in the dim light, feeling the solid warmth of his hand in hers, Ilara knew one thing with absolute certainty. Some loves were worth the risk, some families were meant to grow, and sometimes the bravest thing you could do was simply say yes to joy. The real estate agent's heels clicked against the hardwood floors of Ilara's apartment as she made notes on her tablet. The market's hot right now, she explained, gesturing to the view of Portland's skyline. We should be able to sell quickly, especially in this location. Ilara nodded, trying to focus on the conversation, while watching Anthony through the doorway. He sat in his room, methodically sorting his belongings into new house and memory piles, a system Stephen had suggested to help him process the move. The memory pile centered around items connected to Michael, old photos, the first book they'd read together, tiny things that held pieces of his father's story. Mama, Anthony called, holding up a worn baseball cap. Where'd this go? Ilara's throat tightened. Michael's Portland Timbers cap, the one he'd worn to every home game. What do you think, baby? Anthony studied the cap with serious eyes, then carefully placed it in the memory pile. For special shelf, he decided. But he looked up at her with Michael's eyes. Can Mr. Steve take us to games too? The real estate agent tactfully stepped into the other room, leaving Ilara to kneel beside her son. Would you like that? Going to games with Steve, Anthony nodded. Different than with Daddy. But good different. He said it like a question, seeking permission to want this new thing. Good different is perfect, Ilara assured him, pulling him close. We can make new memories while keeping the old ones safe. Like coffee garden, Anthony said wisely, referring to the thriving plant that had become a symbol of their growing family. Old seeds, new flowers. Sometimes her son's perception stole her breath. Later that evening, as they walked through their potential new home with the contractor, Ilara watched Stephen with Anthony. They were discussing the backyard, where Stephen had sketched plans for a playground that could grow with Anthony, starting with age-appropriate equipment but designed to evolve into a space for older kids. And here, Stephen was saying, pointing to a sunny corner, we could build a greenhouse for coffee gardens and science experiments. Anthony's eyes lit up. Like Daddy's class? Instead of tensing at the mention of Michael, Stephen smiled. Exactly. Your dad was a science teacher, right? Maybe we could make it a special place for learning just like his classroom. Ilara's heart squeezed as Anthony threw his arms around Stephen's legs. Best Daddy too, he declared, and the room went very still. Stephen's eyes met Ilara's over Anthony's head, full of emotion he was trying to contain. Buddy, he said carefully, you know I'm not trying to replace your dad, right? Anthony pulled back just enough to fix Stephen with that old soul stare. Know that. Daddy in heart. He patted his chest, then reached up for Stephen to lift him. You in heart too, different spaces, like Mama said. The contractor suddenly became very interested in his phone, stepping away to give them privacy. Stephen lifted Anthony, his movements slightly shaky. Different spaces, he repeated softly, pressing a kiss to Anthony's curls. Thank you, buddy. Ilara moved to them, wrapping her arms around them both. Okay, she whispered against Stephen's shoulder. He nodded, too overcome to speak. They stood there in the empty room that would become their home, holding each other while sunshine painted patterns on the floors through dust-covered windows. The moment was broken by Stephen's phone buzzing. His expression changed as he read the message, a furrow appearing between his brows. Everything okay? Ilara asked as he set Anthony down. Board meeting tomorrow. He tried to smile, but she saw the tension in his jaw. Just some concerns about the direction of the company since I stepped down. Steve, she touched his arm. If you need to go back... No. His voice was firm. The company's in good hands with Diane. This is just growing pains. But later that night, after they'd returned to their temporary arrangement at his house and Anthony was asleep, Ilara found Stephen in his study, surrounded by financial reports. Talk to me, she said, perching on the edge of his desk. He rubbed his face, looking tired. The board's nervous, stock's down since I stepped back. There's talk of selling to a larger corporation. What would that mean? Best case, nothing changes except ownership. Worst case, he sighed. They could strip the company for parts, close underperforming locations, lay off staff. Ilara's stomach clenched, thinking of Lily and the other employees who'd become like family. Can they do that without your approval? I'm majority shareholder, but if enough board members align against me... He trailed off, then reached for her hand. I'm sorry. This isn't your problem. Hey, she squeezed his fingers. Family, remember, your problems are our problems. His smile was worth every moment of uncertainty she'd pushed through to get here. Speaking of family, he pulled a small box from his desk drawer. I got something for Anthony, for the special shelf. Inside was a beautiful wooden frame, clearly custom-made. The left side held a photo of Michael in his coaching uniform, smiling that sunshine smile Anthony had inherited. The right side was empty. I thought, Stephen said carefully, maybe we could put a current photo on the right. Show him that love grows doesn't divide, that he's allowed to have both. Ilara stared at the frame, at the thoughtful way it honored both past and present. You're incredible. You know that? I just want to do right by him, by both of you. She set the frame down and turned to face him fully. You are, even with all this, she gestured to the financial reports. You're thinking about what Anthony needs, what I need. Always. He stood, pulling her close. You're my priority now. Both of you. Then let us help. She touched his cheek, feeling the slight stubble there. You don't have to handle everything alone anymore. His laugh was soft against her hair. Says the woman who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders for 2 years. Maybe we're both learning. They stayed like that for a moment, holding each other in the quiet of his study. Through the window, Ilara could see the guest house where Anthony slept, where they'd first begun to build this delicate, beautiful thing between them. Move in here, Stephen said suddenly, while the new house is being renovated. No more guest house, no more separate spaces. Let's do this properly. Ilara pulled back enough to see his face. You sure? I've never been more sure of anything. His eyes held hers, serious and loving. I know we said we'd take it slow, and we can still do that. But Ilara, his hands framed her face, I want to wake up every morning knowing you're both here. Want to help Anthony get ready for school? Want to make breakfast together? Want all the small moments that make a family real? It won't be easy, she warned, even as her heart raced. Anthony has nightmares sometimes about losing people. Then we'll be there to hold him, together. The press might talk about us, about the company. Let them, he smiled. I've got something better to focus on. The board will either support my vision for ethical business practices and employee care, or they won't. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But I won't sacrifice this family for corporate profits. Not ever. Ilara studied him in the soft lamplight. This man who'd reorganized his entire life to love them properly, who thought about special shelves and growing playgrounds, who held her son's heart as carefully as he held her own. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's move in, all the way in. She smiled at his obvious joy. But Steve, the frame needs one more thing. What's that? A space in the middle, for a family photo. All of us together. His kiss tasted like gratitude and coffee and promises. They stayed there, wrapped in each other and possibilities, until a small voice called from the doorway. Mama? Mr. Steve? They turned to find Anthony clutching his blue hoodie, eyes heavy with sleep. Without discussion, they both moved to him, creating a safe space in their embrace. Bad dream? Stephen asked softly. Anthony shook his head. Good dream. About new house and coffee garden and... He yawned. Family. Want to sleep in the big bed tonight? Ilara offered, sharing a look with Stephen. All of us together. Anthony's smile was answer enough. As they settled into Stephen's bed, their son between them like a bridge connecting past and future, Ilara felt pieces clicking into place. Tomorrow there would be meetings and decisions, packing boxes and signing papers, all the complicated details of merging lives. But tonight, in this quiet room with the two people she loved most in the world, everything felt simple. Love was love. Family was family. And sometimes, the bravest thing you could do was let your heart build a home in more than one place. The headline blazed across Stephen's tablet screen. Kane and Cohen in crisis. Former CEO's personal life impacts stock values. Below it, someone had managed to capture a photo of Stephen with Anthony on his shoulders at a recent Portland Timbers game. Ilara walking beside them, their happiness obvious even in the grainy distance shot. Ignore it, Ilara said, setting his coffee down with more force than necessary. They were in the kitchen of what was now their shared home, Anthony still sleeping upstairs in what had become their new normal over the past 2 weeks. The stock dropped 12 points. Stephen's voice was tight. The board meeting's in an hour. And you'll handle it like you handle everything. She moved behind him, pressing a kiss to his temple. With grace, and that terrifying intelligence of yours. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. What did I do to deserve you? You loved us, she said simply. The right way, the brave way. Their quiet moment was interrupted by the thunder of small feet on the stairs. Anthony appeared in his favorite rocket ship pajamas, curls wild from sleep. School today? He asked hopefully. They'd been visiting his potential new preschool, and he'd fallen in love with the science-focused curriculum and the friendly teachers. Soon, buddy. Stephen's smile softened the worry lines around his eyes, just waiting on some paperwork. The truth was more complicated. The preschool's tuition was considerable, and while Stephen could easily afford it, Ilara insisted on contributing her share to all family expenses. It was one of the things he loved about her, that fierce independence, that determination to be a full partner in their life together. But with the company's future uncertain, with rumors of hostile takeovers and mass layoffs swirling, neither of them wanted to make major financial commitments. Pancakes? Anthony's request pulled them both from their thoughts. Coming right up. Stephen stood, pressing a quick kiss to Ilara's lips before moving to the stove. Want to help me mix the batter? Their domestic rhythm was interrupted by Stephen's phone buzzing. Diane's name flashed on the screen. Take it, Ilara said, already moving to take over pancake duty. We've got this. Stephen's voice drifted from his study, too low to make out words, but tense enough to make Ilara's chest tight. Anthony, perceptive as always, caught her mood. Mr. Steve worried? He asked, carefully stirring the batter she'd placed in front of him. A little, baby. but it's going to be okay. Because we help? Anthony's expression was so earnest it made her heart ache. Family helps. That's right. She kissed his curls, breathing in the sweet morning scent of him. Family helps. Stephen emerged from his study looking grim. They've called an emergency shareholder meeting. Today. After the board meeting. That's not good, is it? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd learned meant he was trying to find the right words. There's a proposal. To sell to Riverside Corporate. They're offering well above market value. Ilara's stomach dropped. Riverside was known for aggressive acquisitions and even more aggressive restructuring, a polite term for gutting companies and laying off workers. They can't do that without your approval, right? You're majority shareholder. They're trying to force a vote of no confidence. If they succeed... He trailed off, eyes landing on Anthony, who was now completely focused on his pancake art. I could lose everything, the company, the benefits, all of it. Hey, Ilara moved to him, taking his face in her hands. Look at me. You won't lose us. Ever. Whatever happens with the company, we'll figure it out together. His hands covered hers, holding on like she was his anchor in a storm. I can't let them destroy what we built. Not just us, but all of it. The employee benefits, the family-friendly policies, the community programs. Then fight. She held his gaze. Fight smart, fight hard, but fight for what matters. Anthony's voice broke their intense moment. Pancake ready. They turned to find him proudly holding up a misshapen pancake that vaguely resembled a star, or maybe a cat. It was hard to tell. Perfect, Stephen declared, and Ilara watched the tension ease from his shoulders as he lifted Anthony to examine his creation. Absolutely perfect. After breakfast, as Stephen prepared to leave for the meetings, Anthony tugged on his suit jacket. Come back? He asked, and the simple question carried the weight of every loss he'd ever experienced. Stephen knelt, straightening Anthony's perpetually crooked collar with gentle hands. Always, buddy. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. Promise? I promise. Stephen's voice was firm. And you know what else? I was thinking maybe this weekend we could start building that greenhouse we talked about, for all our science experiments. Anthony's eyes lit up. Like Daddy's class? Exactly like that. Stephen glanced at Ilara, including her in the moment. Maybe we could even invite some of your new school friends over when it's done. Start a little science club. The pure joy on Anthony's face was worth every uncertainty they faced. He threw his arms around Stephen's neck, and Ilara heard Stephen's breath catch at the fierce little embrace. Best daddy, Anthony whispered, and this time no one tensed at the words. They felt right, earned, chosen. Later, after Stephen had left and Anthony was occupied with his morning cartoons, Ilara found herself in their bedroom, staring at the family photo they'd recently added to Anthony's special shelf. Michael's smiling face on the left, a current photo of the three of them on the right, and in the middle, just as she'd suggested, a shot of all of them together at a recent park day, Anthony between them on a swing, 3 smiles bright in the sunshine. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. News isn't good. Board members arriving with lawyers. Ilara's hands shook as she replied, Keep me posted? She spent the morning trying to maintain normalcy for Anthony, while her phone buzzed with updates from Lily and other cafe employees. Each message made her anxiety spike. Corporate suits everywhere. Diane looks worried. Someone mentioned restructuring. Stephen's holding his ground, but around noon her phone rang. Stephen. How bad? She asked without preamble. Bad. His voice was tight. They're voting this afternoon. I need... He took a shaky breath. I need you here. Both of you, if you can. We're on our way. She dressed Anthony quickly, explaining they were going to support Steve at work. Her son, seeming to understand the gravity of the situation, was unusually quiet as they drove to the corporate offices. The main conference room was thick with tension when they arrived. Stephen stood at the head of the table, surrounded by board members and lawyers, but his entire being lightened when he saw them. Mr. Kane, one of the lawyers started, this is highly irregular. This, Stephen's voice cut through the room, is my family, and they stay. He lifted Anthony into his arms, pressing a kiss to Ilara's temple before turning back to the board. Now, let's talk about what really matters. Not profit margins or stock prices, but people, community, the values this company was built on. Ilara watched him speak, their son secure in his arms, and felt something settle in her chest. Whatever happened next, they would face it together, as a family, as a unit, as something stronger than any corporate takeover could break. Anthony's small hand found hers, squeezing with surprising strength, and she squeezed back, both of them holding on to what mattered most, each other, their love, their chosen family, built from loss and hope and the courage to try again. The storm might be gathering, but they had weathered worse. They would weather this, too, together. Sometimes, Stephen's voice carried through the conference room, steady despite the tension crackling in the air. We forget what truly builds a company. It's not stock prices or profit margins. It's people, community, the kind of values that can't be quantified on a spreadsheet. Anthony sat in Ilara's lap, unusually still, his small fingers clutching his ever-present blue hoodie as he watched Stephen command the room. Board members and lawyers shifted uncomfortably under the weight of Stephen's quiet conviction. When I stepped down as CEO, Stephen continued, it wasn't just about following my heart. His eyes found Ilara's, drawing strength from her presence. It was about living our company's values, about showing our employees that family matters, that love matters. Noble sentiments, Russell Matthews, the Riverside corporate representative, cut in smoothly. But sentiment doesn't pay shareholders. No? Stephen's smile held an edge. Let's talk numbers then. He pressed a button, and the screen behind him filled with data. Since implementing our family-first policies, paid parental leave, flexible scheduling, on-site childcare, employee retention has increased by 60%. Training costs have dropped. Productivity is up. More slides appeared, showing community engagement metrics, customer loyalty statistics, long-term growth projections. But most importantly, Stephen's voice softened as he looked at Anthony. We've created something real, something that matters. Ask any of our employees, your employees, Russell interrupted, who you've made dependent on unsustainable benefits. My employees, a new voice rang out, who would walk through fire for this company because Stephen Kane taught us what real leadership looks like. Lily stood in the doorway, still in her cane-and-cumber apron, holding a tablet. Behind her, a crowd had gathered, employees from every level of the company, many still in their work uniforms. We took a vote, Lily announced, stepping forward to hand her tablet to Diane. Every employee, every location, we're willing to take a temporary pay cut if it means keeping the company independent, keeping our benefits, keeping our family. Murmurs rippled through the board members as Diane reviewed the data. Stephen stood very still, emotion clear on his face as he looked at his employees, his people, who had shown up to fight for the soul of their company. Anthony squirmed in Ilara's lap. Help, Mr. Steve, he whispered. You already are, baby, she assured him. Just by being here. Diane cleared her throat. The employee vote is nearly unanimous, and I have something else to add. She produced a folder. Projections for our new community-based expansion model. Small locations, locally staffed with profit-sharing programs for employees. The pilot program in Seattle is already showing remarkable results. This is all very touching, Russell said, though his confidence had visibly wavered. But the shareholders are right here, called a familiar voice. The elegant older woman who had ordered vanilla lattes from Ilara stood up. And speaking as someone who's held Kane & Koba stock since Stephen was in college, I can tell you this. What makes this company valuable isn't its assets. It's its heart. One by one, other shareholders began to speak up. They talked about long-term stability over short-term gains, about corporate responsibility, about the value of being part of something meaningful. Stephen moved to stand behind Ilara's chair, one hand on her shoulder, the other reaching down to touch Anthony's curls. Their son looked up at him with complete trust, and Ilara felt Stephen's fingers tighten on her shoulder. I propose a new vote, Diane announced, not on selling the company, but on recommitting to our core values, on making Stephen's vision, all of it including the family-first policies and community focus, permanently part of our corporate charter. Russell started to object, but the room had already shifted. Board members were nodding, shareholders were sitting straighter, and the employees lining the walls stood proud and united. The vote was swift and decisive. When it was done, when Russell had stormed out and congratulations were being shared, Anthony tugged on Stephen's sleeve. We won? He asked seriously. Stephen lifted him up, pressing their foreheads together in a gesture that had become their special connection. We won, buddy. All of us together. Family strong, Anthony declared, and the simple wisdom of it made several board members wipe their eyes. Later that evening, after the excitement had died down and they'd celebrated with the cafe staff, they stood together in the backyard of their new home. The greenhouse was half-built, its framework reaching toward the darkening sky like a promise. Sorry about your stock portfolio, Ilara teased gently, watching Anthony arrange his science materials on the small workbench Stephen had built him. Worth it. Stephen pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. Besides, I think we're about to revolutionize the coffee industry with our community-based model. Diane's already talking expansion. And that's what you want even after stepping down? What I want, he turned her to face him, is right here, this family, this life we're building. The company is important, but it's not everything. Mama, Daddy! Anthony's call, so natural now, so right, drew their attention. Look, they moved to where he stood proudly by his workbench. There, in a neat row, sat 3 coffee gardens. The original one they'd grown together, now flourishing, and 2 new seedlings just breaking through the soil. Family, Anthony explained, pointing to each plant. Big love, little loves, growing together. Ilara felt tears spill down her cheeks as Stephen knelt beside their son. That's beautiful, buddy. Did you know plants in the same family help each other grow stronger? Anthony nodded solemnly. Like us. And Daddy in heaven. All helping grow love. Stephen's eyes met Ilara's over their son's head, full of emotion that mirrored her own. This child, who had lost so much, who had taught them both about the capacity of hearts to expand, to heal, to love in new ways while honoring old loves. Speaking of family, Stephen said carefully, reaching into his pocket, I've been wanting to ask you both something. Ilara's breath caught as he withdrew a small box. Inside lay 3 rings, one clearly an engagement ring, but the other 2, family rings, Stephen explained, his voice rough with emotion. One for each of us, because this isn't just about me and you, Ilara. It's about all of us, building something together. Anthony touched the smallest ring with wonder. Like Daddy's ring on special shelf? Similar but different, Stephen said. Your Daddy's ring represents the love that brought you into this world. These rings represent the love that's helping us build something new. Both are important. Both are real. Ilara knelt beside them, heart so full it hurt. What do you think, baby? Should we make it official? Become a forever family? Anthony looked at the rings, then at his coffee gardens, then at them both. With the simple clarity of children, he took the smallest ring and slipped it on his finger. Already forever, he said. Rings just show everybody else. Stephen laughed even as tears spilled down his cheeks. Smart kid we've got here. Brilliant, Ilara agreed, letting him slide the engagement ring onto her finger. It caught the last light of day, sparkling like promises. Later that night, after Anthony was asleep in his new room, the special shelf watching over him, holding both old memories and new ones, Ilara and Stephen stood in their greenhouse. The frame was incomplete, but already it felt like a sanctuary. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. For what? For loving us the right way. For making space for Michael's memory while building new memories. For understanding that love multiplies. It doesn't divide. He tilted her face up to his. Thank you for being brave enough to try again. For teaching me that family isn't about biology. It's about choice. About showing up every day and choosing each other. Their kiss tasted like coffee and promises. Like growth and grace. Like love that had learned to bloom in unexpected places. Through the greenhouse framework, stars twinkled above them. The same stars Stephen had taught Anthony about. The same stars that watched over all kinds of love, all kinds of families, all kinds of growth. And there, in their unfinished sanctuary, surrounded by the framework of dreams yet to be realized, they held each other and breathed in the truth they'd learned. That sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about first loves or perfect matches. They're about second chances and brave hearts. About children who teach us to love bigger, fuller, braver. About families built from choice and courage and the simple, profound decision to grow together. Like coffee gardens, reaching toward the light. Like hearts learning to bloom again. Like love, always love, finding new ways to flourish. 1 year later, the greenhouse sparkled with morning light, its glass walls creating prisms that danced across the flourishing plants within. Anthony, now almost 4, stood on his special step stool, carefully measuring water for the coffee gardens that had multiplied into a small forest. Remember what Daddy Steve taught us? Ilara asked, watching him work with the precision that reminded her so much of both his fathers. Michael's curiosity and Stephen's attention to detail somehow perfectly merged in their son. Different plants, different water, Anthony recited, his blue science apron a birthday gift from Stephen covered in proud dirt stains. Like different love, different ways to show it. Ilara smiled, touching her wedding ring, a simple band that matched the ones Stephen and Anthony wore, their family rings, as Anthony called them. The engagement ring sparkled beside it, but it was the matching bands that meant the most to all of them. "Ready for the big presentation?" she asked, helping him gather his materials. Anthony nodded solemnly. His preschool science fair was today, and he'd chosen to present his coffee garden project, complete with careful drawings of each growth stage and a thorough explanation of how families, like plants, could grow in different ways. "Daddy coming?" he asked, meaning Stephen. He'd taken to calling him just Daddy a few months ago, while references to Michael had naturally evolved to Daddy in Heaven, a distinction Anthony had created himself. Of course, he's probably already there setting up your display table. Indeed, when they arrived at the preschool, they found Stephen in his element, arranging Anthony's project materials with the same care he once used for corporate presentations. He'd taken a step back from daily operations at Kane & Co., focusing on their new community-based expansion model while Diane handled CEO duties. The change had given him more time for moments like this: school events, family dinners, weekend science experiments. "There's my scientist," Stephen beamed as Anthony ran to him. He caught him in a practiced swing, their matching grins bright enough to light up the room. "Ready to show everyone what you learned?" "Coffee garden helps people understand," Anthony explained, straightening his bow tie, another matching touch he'd insisted on sharing with Stephen today. About different ways to grow love. Other parents were arriving, setting up their own children's projects, but more than a few stopped to watch Anthony's presentation practice. He'd become something of a legend at the school, the little boy who could explain photosynthesis to 4-year-olds and make them understand, who turned every science lesson into a story about family and growth. And these, Anthony pointed to his row of thriving plants, show how love grows bigger. "Original plant," he indicated the first coffee garden they'd ever grown together, now strong and tall, made new plants. Like original love makes new love, all connected. Ilara felt Stephen's arm slip around her waist as they watched their son confidently explain his project to the gathering crowd. On Anthony's display board, alongside his careful drawings and scientific notes, sat the 3-part frame that still held pride of place on his special shelf. Michael smiling on the left, their new family photo on the right, and in the middle, a shot from their small intimate wedding in the greenhouse 3 months ago, Anthony standing between them, all three wearing not just matching rings, but matching smiles. "He's going to win," Stephen murmured proudly. "It's not about winning," Ilara reminded him, even as she glowed with equal pride. "Tell that to our son who created a full statistical analysis of plant growth rates." "Wonder where he gets that from, Mr. Spreadsheet?" Their playful banter was interrupted by Anthony's teacher, calling everyone to attention. As the science fair officially began, Anthony took his place behind his display with the quiet confidence that marked everything he did. "Love you," he whispered to both of them, before turning to greet his first visitors. "Love you more," they whispered back in unison, their practiced response making him smile even as he launched into his presentation. Later that evening, after Anthony had indeed won first place, because science and heart together are unbeatable, according to the judges, they celebrated in their greenhouse. The space had become the heart of their home, part laboratory, part sanctuary, part growing testament to the family they'd built together. "Special shelf needs new picture," Anthony declared, carefully placing his blue ribbon next to his project journal. "Which one?" Stephen asked, though they all knew he'd already ordered a custom frame for the science fair photos. "All of us, with Coffee Garden family." Anthony gestured to his flourishing plants. "Show how everything grows together." Ilara looked at their son, this amazing child who had taught them so much about love's capacity to expand, to adapt, to grow in new directions while keeping its roots strong, who had somehow known, even at his youngest, that hearts were made to hold more than one kind of love. "I think that's perfect," she said, reaching for both her boys. Everything together. Stephen's arms wrapped around them both, and for a moment they stood in the gentle evening light, surrounded by the lives they'd grown, plants and love and family, all flourishing together. Through the greenhouse glass, the first stars were appearing, the same stars that had watched over their first date, their first home, their wedding, the same stars that Anthony said helped Daddy Michael watch over them. "Happy?" Anthony asked, looking up at them both with those wise eyes that held echoes of every love that had shaped him. "So happy," Stephen assured him, pressing a kiss to his curls. "More than happy," Ilara added, holding them both closer. "Complete." And there, in their greenhouse sanctuary, surrounded by coffee gardens and science projects, by old memories and new dreams, by love that had learned to grow in every direction, they were exactly that, complete, connected, family. A testament to love's ultimate truth, that it never truly ends. It only transforms, growing new blooms from ancient roots, turning loss into legacy, and proving that sometimes the most beautiful gardens grow in unexpected places. All you need is the courage to plant new seeds, the patience to watch them grow, and the wisdom to know that love, like their coffee gardens, only multiplies when shared, forever growing, forever blooming, forever family. The end. If you were in Alara's shoes, how would you deal with the fear of loving again after such a deep loss? What do you find more difficult, honoring the memory of a past love or having the courage to open your heart to a new love? Anthony, in his childlike innocence, taught us that the heart has room for different kinds of love. Do you agree that it is possible to love again without diminishing the significance of a previous love? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. She hugged the wrong man at the airport and ended up in a millionaire's arms. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The morning alarm shattered the silence at 4:45 a.m., a sound Milena Carter had learned to hate less than being late. Her fingers found the phone in the dark, muscle memory from 1,000 identical mornings. The dim light from the screen illuminated the exhaustion etched across her face, highlighting dark circles under eyes that had seen too many early mornings and late nights. "Just breathe," she whispered to herself, a daily mantra that kept her moving forward. The wooden floor creaked beneath her feet as she made her way to Luca's room, each step carefully placed to maintain the precious minutes of silence before their day began. Her son lay curled in his bed, star-patterned blanket wrapped tight around his small frame. Luca's world operated on precise routines, and waking him even 5 minutes early could derail their entire morning. Milena watched him sleep, allowing herself 30 seconds, counted in her head, to simply exist in this moment of peace. "Time to wake up, baby," she called softly, flicking on his dinosaur nightlight rather than the harsh overhead lamp. Luca stirred, his eyes opening with the careful deliberation that marked all his movements. No sudden changes, no unexpected shifts. The morning routine unfolded like a well-rehearsed dance. Luca's blue cup filled exactly 3/4 with apple juice, his breakfast arranged in perfect triangles, clothes laid out in the exact order he would put them on. Milena moved through these motions while simultaneously preparing herself for work, her own breakfast forgotten in the rush. "Mrs. Henderson will pick you up for school today," she reminded him, watching his face for any sign of distress at the change in routine. "Remember, we talked about this yesterday. Mommy has to work at the clinic, then go to the airport to pick up Uncle Drew." Luca aligned his fork perfectly parallel to his plate, his way of showing he understood. Sometimes Milena wished she could step into his world, see how he processed everything around him. But for now, she had to trust the small signs he gave her, the subtle ways he communicated his understanding. The morning passed in its usual blur of activity, dropping Luca at Mrs. Henderson's, catching the 6:15 bus to the clinic, processing patients with a smile that hid her bone-deep fatigue. By the time her shift ended at 4 p.m., Milena's feet ached in her sensible shoes, and her mind was already racing ahead to her evening shift at the airport cafe. The text from her brother came just as she was clocking out, landing at 6:30, gate B12. "Miss you, sis." Drew was the only one who still called her sis, the only family member who hadn't drifted away after she'd become pregnant with Luca. His monthly visits were like oxygen, giving her precious moments to breathe, to remember she wasn't completely alone in this world. The bus ride to the airport was crowded, forcing Milena to stand swaying with each turn as she checked her phone repeatedly. Mrs. Henderson had sent a photo of Luca, methodically arranging his toy cars by color, his way of staying calm when his routine changed. The sight made Milena's heart ache. 6 years of single motherhood had taught her that guilt was a constant companion, as familiar as her own reflection. The airport terminal hummed with its usual chaos. Reunions, departures, lives intersecting in a constant flow of movement. Milena's eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Drew's familiar leather jacket. Her brother always wore the same one, a comfort in the sea of faces that threatened to overwhelm her. Then she saw it, the worn brown leather, the slight tear near the right shoulder that Drew refused to repair. Without thinking, moving on pure emotion and exhaustion, Milena stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You're late," she mumbled into the jacket, inhaling the scent that wasn't quite right, her tired brain taking too long to process the wrongness. The man turned, and Milena's world tilted sharply. Instead of Drew's familiar face, she found herself staring into startled green eyes that definitely did not belong to her brother. The man was taller than Drew, with carefully trimmed facial hair and an expression that shifted from surprise to something softer, more intrigued. "I don't think I am," he said, his voice warm and tinged with amusement, "though I'm suddenly wishing I was whoever you're waiting for." Mortification crashed over Milena in waves. She stepped back so quickly she nearly stumbled, her professional mask slipping into place like armor. "I'm so sorry," she managed, her voice steady despite the embarrassment burning in her cheeks. "I thought you were my brother." The man, who wore his expensive suit with the casual ease of someone born to wealth, smiled. Not the condescending smile Milena had come to expect from people of his obvious social status, but something genuine that reached his eyes. No harm done. "I'm Rowan." He extended his hand, and Milena found herself taking it automatically, her customer service training kicking in. His grip was firm but gentle, and for a brief moment, she felt the strange spark of connection that sometimes occurs between strangers in moments of shared vulnerability. "Milena," she replied, then immediately wondered why she'd given him her real name. She pulled her hand back, tucking it into her pocket where it still tingled from the contact. "I should go find my brother." "Of course." Rowan adjusted the strap of his leather briefcase, but his eyes didn't leave her face. It was nice being mistaken for him. Milena turned away, her heart pounding with an unfamiliar rhythm. She forced herself to walk, not run, fighting the urge to look back. She was 33 years old, far too old for this kind of schoolgirl embarrassment. She had responsibilities, a son who needed her, bills to pay, and exactly 45 minutes to find Drew before her shift at the cafe started. But as she walked away, she could feel Rowan's gaze following her, heavy with unspoken possibilities. And for the first time in years, something inside her chest fluttered, a sensation so foreign it took her a moment to recognize it as hope. She found Drew 10 minutes later at the correct gate, wearing a denim jacket and a concerned expression. "You okay, sis? You look like you've seen a ghost." Milena shook her head, pushing away the memory of green eyes and a gentle smile. "I'm fine, just tired. Come on, I've got to get to work." As they walked toward the cafe where she would start her evening shift, Milena deliberately avoided looking toward Gate C, where she'd left Rowan. She had learned long ago that some things weren't meant for people like her, single mothers working 2 jobs, women who counted every penny and still came up short, women who couldn't afford to dream. But that night, as she served coffee to travelers and cleaned tables with mechanical precision, she caught herself looking up every time the door chimed, and each time it wasn't him, she felt a small pang of disappointment that she refused to acknowledge. After all, real life wasn't a fairy tale. It was alarm clocks at 4:45 a.m. and carefully managed routines and doing whatever it took to keep your child safe and fed. It was being strong when you wanted to break and never, ever allowing yourself to want more than you could safely reach. Yet as she counted her tips at the end of her shift, Milena found herself touching her lips, remembering the smile she'd given a stranger, the first real smile that had crossed her face in longer than she could remember. And in the quiet of the empty cafe, she allowed herself exactly 30 seconds, counted in her head, to wonder what it might feel like to be held by someone who looked at her the way Rowan had, just before she walked away. Then the 30 seconds ended, and Milena Carter did what she always did. She straightened her shoulders, wiped down the counter one last time, and stepped out into the night, ready to face another day of reality. 3 days after the airport incident, the evening rush at Heaven's Cup Cafe brought its usual parade of hurried travelers and delayed flights. Milena mechanically wiped down the counter, her movements precise and practiced. The coffee grinder's familiar whir almost drowned out the overhead announcement of another postponed departure. She'd almost convinced herself she'd imagined him. Almost. Until he walked through the door at 8:47 p.m., wearing a grey sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent, looking decidedly out of place among the tired passengers and their rolling suitcases. Rowan's eyes found hers immediately, as if he'd known exactly where she'd be standing. He'd traded his business suit for casual wear, but nothing could disguise the quiet confidence in his stride. Her heart performed an unauthorized somersault. "Just passing through?" Milena asked, her tone carefully professional as he approached the counter. She noticed he'd chosen the exact spot where the overhead light caught his eyes, making them appear almost translucent. "Actually," Rowan replied, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "I heard this place has the best coffee in the airport. We're the only coffee shop in Terminal C." Then I guess the review was accurate. Despite herself, Milena felt a smile threatening to break through her professional mask. She pushed it down, focusing instead on reorganizing the already perfectly aligned sugar packets. "For what can I get you?" "Whatever you recommend." He leaned slightly forward, reading her name tag with an intensity that made her skin tingle. Milena. The way he said her name, like he was tasting it, made her fingers fumble with the paper cups. "Our house blend is popular with travelers." "Perfect." He watched as she worked, her movements quick and efficient. "You weren't here yesterday." The comment caught her off guard. She kept her eyes on the coffee stream, measuring its flow. "Tuesday is my day off." "I know. Now." The implications of his words hung in the air between them. He'd come looking for her yesterday, had probably planned his casual appearance, right down to the perfectly rumpled sweater that made him look more approachable, less like the CEO he was. Milena snapped a lid onto his cup with more force than necessary. $4.75. He handed her a 20, their fingers brushing briefly. "Keep the change." "I don't need." "Consider it an apology for yesterday's wasted trip." His smile was disarming, genuine in a way that made her defenses waver. "Though technically you owe me an apology too. You did hug me without permission." Heat crept up her neck. "Shy, that was a case of mistaken identity. Still the best thing that's happened to me at an airport." He took a sip of coffee, his eyes never leaving hers, "including this coffee, which is exactly as average as I expected." A laugh escaped before she could stop it. "Then why are you drinking it?" "Because you made it." The simple honesty in his voice made her breath catch. Behind her, the coffee grinder started up again, filling the silence that stretched between them. Milena busied herself with wiping invisible spots off the counter, very aware of his continued presence. "My shift ends in 20 minutes, she found herself saying, immediately regretting the words. "I know that too." Of course he did. He'd probably timed his appearance precisely, the same way he'd chosen his casual outfit and his disarming smile. Everything about him screamed calculation, yet something in his eyes spoke of genuine interest. "I have to get home," she added firmly. "I have responsibilities." "Let me drive you." "I take the bus." "I know. I saw you waiting at the stop yesterday." She stilled, looking up at him sharply. "Are you stalking me?" "I'm trying to get to know you," he corrected, his tone serious now. "Admittedly, not in the most conventional way, but something tells me you don't have time for conventional." He was right, and that irritated her more than his presumption. Single motherhood had stripped away any chance at normal dating rituals years ago. Between work, Luca's needs, and the constant juggling of bills, her life ran on a precision schedule that left no room for coffee dates or casual flirtation. "I have a son," she said abruptly, watching his face carefully. "He's 6. He's autistic. My life revolves around his needs." "I know." This time, she couldn't hide her surprise. "How?" "You have a photo taped inside your locker door. I saw it when you were getting your apron. He's wearing a blue shirt with planets on it, sitting on a swing. He looks happy." The detail in his observation touched something deep inside her. Most people's eyes glazed over the moment she mentioned Luca's autism, but Rowan had noticed not just her son, but the specific details of a photo glimpsed briefly through a partially open locker door. "He likes space," she said softly, "especially stars. He draws them everywhere. Tell me more." And somehow, in the quiet lull between customers, Milena found herself talking about Luca, about his careful way of moving through the world, his silent observations, his love of patterns and order. Rowan listened with genuine interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed he was truly engaging with her words. "My shift is ending," she said finally, noticing the time with a start. "I need to catch the 9:30 bus. Let me drive you home." Before she could protest, he added, "No expectations, no pressure, just a ride home on a cold night." She should say no. Every life lesson, every hard-earned piece of wisdom screamed at her to decline, but her feet ached from a double shift, and the thought of waiting in the cold for a bus that might be late made her resolve waver. Just a ride, she said firmly. His answering smile was warm enough to chase away the evening chill. Just a ride. 20 minutes later, Milena found herself in the passenger seat of a car that cost more than she made in a year. The leather seats were heated, the engine barely a whisper as they pulled away from the airport. She gave directions in short, clipped sentences, hyper-aware of the growing distance between this moment and her normal life. "Your brother," Rowan said as they waited at a red light. "The one you thought I was. Tell me about him." "Drew. He visits once a month. Brings Luca small gifts. Nothing expensive, just thoughtful things. Last time it was a pack of glow-in-the-dark stars for his ceiling. Luca lined them up in perfect rows. You smile differently when you talk about them." "What do you mean?" "Softer, less guarded." He glanced at her briefly. "It's beautiful." The compliment landed like a physical touch. Milena turned to look out the window, watching familiar streets pass by. "This is my stop," she said, as they approached her apartment complex. "Thank you for the ride." Rowan pulled up to the curb but made no move to get out. "Will you be working tomorrow night?" "Yes." "Good." He smiled, that disarming smile again. "I hear the coffee's terrible, but the company's worth it." Milena got out of the car before she could say something foolish, something that might encourage this impossible thing growing between them. But as she walked toward her building, she heard his window roll down. "Milena!" She turned, arms wrapped around herself in the cold. "Thank you for trusting me with the ride, and with Luca. I know neither was easy for you." She nodded, not trusting her voice, and hurried inside. From her window, she watched his car idle for a moment longer before pulling away, its taillights disappearing into the night. Later, after checking on a sleeping Luca and paying the babysitter, Milena stood in her small bathroom, staring at her reflection. The woman who looked back seemed different somehow, less tired, more alive. "Don't," she told her reflection firmly. "Don't you dare hope." But as she turned away, she caught herself touching the smile that lingered on her lips, a smile that felt as dangerous as it did wonderful. In her son's room, the glow-in-dark stars cast tiny pinpoints of light on the ceiling, arranged in perfect lines. Milena stood in the doorway, watching Luca's peaceful sleep, and allowed herself to remember the way Rowan had listened when she talked about her son, not with pity or discomfort, but with genuine interest, as if Luca's differences made him more fascinating, not less. "Just a ride," she whispered to herself. That's all it was. But even as she said the words, she knew she was lying, because somehow in the space of one evening, Rowan Ellison had managed to slip past her carefully constructed walls and plant a seed of possibility that terrified her. Tomorrow would be Thursday. She would wake at 4:45 a.m. She would make Luca's breakfast, go to work, count every penny, and continue the endless dance of survival that had become her life. But for tonight, just for tonight, she allowed herself to feel the warmth that lingered in her chest, as bright and dangerous as the stars on her son's ceiling. Rain pelted the clinic's windows, turning the Friday morning rush into a blur of umbrellas and squeaking shoes on linoleum. Milena's fingers flew over the keyboard, processing insurance forms with mechanical efficiency, while her mind drifted to last night's conversation in Rowan's car. 3 rides home in 3 days, each one feeling more dangerous than the last. Ms. Carter. She looked up to find Dr. Stevens frowning at her, a chart in his hands. "Your son's prescription. You forgot to pick it up yesterday." Reality crashed back like a bucket of cold water. Luca's medication. How could she have forgotten? "I'm so sorry. It's okay." The older doctor's expression softened. "I know you're working double shifts. I filled it for you." He placed the paper bag on her desk. "But Milena, take care of yourself too." She clutched the bag, shame burning in her throat. 7 years of never missing a prescription, never dropping a single ball in the intricate juggling act of her life, until now. Until a man with kind eyes made her forget, just for a moment, the weight of her responsibilities. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Henderson. "Luca, having difficult morning. Won't put on blue sweater. Very upset." Milena's heart clenched. The blue sweater was in the wash. She'd forgotten to run the laundry last night after work. Another ball dropped. She typed back quickly. "Check his bottom drawer. Green sweater with silver buttons. Tell him it's like stars in the forest." 3 dots appeared as Mrs. Henderson typed. Long minutes passed before. It worked. He's calm now. Starting breakfast? Milena released a shaky breath, aware of how close they'd come to a full meltdown, all because she'd let herself get distracted by impossible dreams. The morning crawled by in a haze of insurance codes and patient check-ins. During her lunch break, huddled in the small break room, she pulled out her phone to cancel her evening shift at the cafe. She couldn't risk any more distractions, but before she could make the call, a new message appeared. "I have a serious question about coffee. Rowan." Her finger hovered over the delete button. Another message. "Does the terrible taste grow on you eventually? Or do airport cafe employees have special training in taste bud suppression?" Despite everything, she smiled, then immediately frowned at herself for smiling. "How did you get my number?" she typed back. "I may have bribed Joey from the morning shift with concert tickets. That's crossing a line." "I know. I'm sorry. I missed you this morning." The simple honesty of his words made her chest ache. She'd switched to an earlier shift at the cafe, specifically to avoid him. He'd figured that out too, apparently. "I have to go," she typed. "Work. Have dinner with me tonight." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because I'm drowning," she wanted to type. "Because I'm one missed shift away from not making rent. Because my son needs stability and routine, not a mother who's suddenly acting like a teenager with a crush." Instead, she wrote, "Because this isn't real." The 3 dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came. "It feels real to me." Milena turned off her phone, forcing herself to focus on work. But his words echoed in her head all afternoon, through patient check-ins and insurance calls, through the steady drum of rain against windows. At 4:30, she stepped out into the wet evening, umbrella clutched against the wind. The bus stop was crowded with people seeking shelter from the rain. She checked her phone, now turned back on, and saw 3 missed calls from Mrs. Henderson. Her heart stopped. The voicemail played. "Milena, don't worry. Everything's fine. It's just, well, there's someone here. He brought Luca's prescription, said you left it at work. He's sitting with Luca now, actually. They're organizing Luca's car collection by wheel size. Luca's never let anyone touch his cars before." The world tilted sharply on its axis. Milena's fingers shook as she dialed for a rideshare she couldn't afford. 10 minutes later, she burst through Mrs. Henderson's front door, rain-soaked and frantic, and stopped dead in her tracks. There, on the living room floor, sat Rowan Ellison in his $1,000 suit, meticulously measuring toy car wheels with a ruler, while Luca watched intently. Her son's face held the focused concentration he only showed when something deeply interested him. "The red one has slightly larger wheels," Rowan was saying softly. "See, 2.4 centimeters instead of 2.3. Where should we put it in the line?" Luca's hand moved carefully, adjusting the car's position with precision. His shoulders were relaxed, his breathing even. No signs of distress at having a stranger in his space. "Perfect," Rowan nodded. "Exactly right. You have an amazing eye for detail." Mrs. Henderson appeared at Milena's elbow. "He's been here almost an hour," she whispered. "Luca hasn't made a single stress sound, not one. He even smiled when they started measuring." Milena's throat felt too tight to speak. She watched as Rowan handed Luca another car, maintaining the perfect balance of engagement and space that so many people got wrong. "The prescription," she managed finally. "I forgot. It's on the kitchen counter," Mrs. Henderson said. "He got it before the pharmacy closed. Said he noticed it on your desk when he stopped by the clinic." She paused. "How's Milena? Who is he?" "Nobody," she whispered. "He's nobody." But even as she said it, Rowan looked up and saw her. His smile was careful, contained, as if he knew he'd overstepped but couldn't quite bring himself to regret it. "Hey," he said softly. "Luca's teaching me about proper car organization. Did you know the silver Corvette has exactly the same wheelbase as the blue Mustang? But they're in different categories because the Corvette's hood is 0.3 centimeters longer." Luca held up the cars in question, demonstrating without words. His eyes were clear, engaged. He looked happy. "I should go," Rowan said, standing slowly. "Thank you for letting me learn about cars, Luca. Maybe next time you can show me your star collection." Luca didn't respond verbally, but he carefully placed the silver Corvette in Rowan's hand, a gesture that made Mrs. Henderson gasp softly. Sharing toys was not something Luca did, ever. Rowan seemed to understand the significance. He held the car with exaggerated care, examining it from all angles. "This is a very special car," he said seriously. "Thank you for trusting me with it. Would it be okay if I gave it back to your mum to keep safe for you?" A small nod. Rowan placed the car in Milena's palm, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. "I'm sorry if I overstepped," he said quietly. I I couldn't stand the thought of you worrying about the prescription all night. She should be angry, should tell him to leave, to stop inserting himself into her carefully structured life. Instead, she found herself asking, "How did you know?" "About the cars, about how to talk to him. I googled autism and routines after you told me about him, read some parent forums, learned about the importance of precision and respect for organization. The rest was just listening, watching, like he does." The simple thoughtfulness of it undid her completely. "Have dinner with me?" he said again. "Not tonight. I know tonight you need to be with him. But tomorrow, please." Behind them, Luca had returned to his cars, contentedly measuring and adjusting. Mrs. Henderson was pretending to dust nearby, obviously eavesdropping. The rain drummed against windows, and somewhere a clock ticked. Marking each second, she stood there holding a toy Corvette like it was the key to something she didn't dare name. "Okay," she heard herself say. Rowan's smile was like sunrise. "Okay," he echoed softly. He left quietly, carefully, the same way he'd apparently entered their lives. Milena watched through the window as he got into his expensive car, somehow not looking out of place, despite having spent an hour measuring toy cars on a suburban living room floor. "Well," Mrs. Henderson said behind her, "I guess he's not nobody after all." No, Milena thought, clutching the silver Corvette. He wasn't nobody, and that was exactly what terrified her. Because now, watching him drive away in the rain, she realized it wasn't just her heart at risk anymore. Somehow, without warning, Rowan Ellison had found his way into Luca's carefully ordered world as well. And if this all fell apart, when it all fell apart, she wasn't sure either of them would recover. Saturday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. Milena stood in front of her bathroom mirror, studying her reflection with critical eyes. She'd borrowed a dress from her clinic co-worker. Simple, sun, black, man, nothing fancy. But the woman staring back at her looked different somehow. Hopeful, terrified. "You look pretty, Mommy." She turned to find Luca in the doorway, holding his favorite blue blanket. He didn't make eye contact, but his fingers traced patterns on the soft fabric, a sign he was processing something important. "Thank you, baby." She knelt to his level, careful not to wrinkle the dress. "You remember what we talked about? Mrs. Henderson will stay with you tonight. Everything will be exactly the same as always. Except you." The simple observation hit her like a physical blow. Luca rarely spoke in complete sentences, preferring to communicate through gestures and single words. When he did speak clearly, it usually meant something significant was troubling him. "I'll be back before bedtime," she promised. "We'll still do our star count together." He nodded, but his fingers moved faster on the blanket. "The carman, he knows about wheels." "Yes, he does." His ruler was precise, to the millimeter. Milena's heart squeezed. Of course, that's what had won her son's trust. Rowan's attention to exact measurements, his respect for precision. Would it be okay if he came to visit again sometime? Luca considered this, his head tilted slightly. Either silver Corvette needs remeasuring. The carpet fibers might have altered the wheelbase. A car horn sounded outside, not Rowan's car, but Mrs. Henderson's ancient sedan pulling into the driveway. Milena checked her phone. 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes until Rowan would arrive. "Dinner at 6:55, she reminded Luca, as Mrs. Henderson let herself in. "Then homework, then your documentary about deep-sea creatures, then bath at 8:30. So I'll be back for stars at 9 till. I've got his schedule written down to the minute," Mrs. Henderson assured her, hanging up her rain jacket. "Though I doubt I need it. This young man keeps better time than my kitchen clock." Luca had already moved to the dining room table, arranging his homework supplies with mathematical precision. Milena watched him, guilt warring with another emotion she didn't dare name. "Go," Mrs. Henderson whispered. "Live a little. We'll be fine." At exactly 7 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside. Milena's hands shook as she checked her lipstick one final time. "Call me if I will. Now go before you talk yourself out of it." Rowan stood beside his car, wearing charcoal slacks and a blue sweater that probably cost more than her monthly utilities, but his smile was nervous, almost shy, as he opened the passenger door. "You look beautiful." She slid into the leather seat, hyper-aware of every wrinkle in her borrowed dress. "Where are we going?" "I thought we'd try this little place I know. Very quiet, no crowds. They make incredible pasta." He glanced at her as he pulled away from the curb. "But if you'd rather go somewhere else?" "No, that sounds nice." She fiddled with her purse strap. "I haven't been to a real restaurant in ages. Usually it's drive-through between shifts or microwave dinners after Luca's asleep. I know. His voice was soft. You work so hard. I do what I have to do. That's not what I meant. He navigated through quiet streets, away from the busier parts of town. I meant it as admiration, not pity. The way you've built your life around Luca's needs. The way you keep going no matter what. It's remarkable. It's survival. It's strength. He turned down a tree-lined street she'd never seen before. And it's one of the many reasons I can't stop thinking about you. Before she could respond, they pulled up to a small restaurant tucked between old brick buildings. Warm light spilled from its windows, and the sign above the door read simply, Marco's. Inside, the host greeted Rowan by name and led them to a corner table, partially hidden by a living wall of plants. The privacy of it, the obvious consideration for her comfort, made something in Milena's chest tighten. The owner's son is on the spectrum, Rowan said quietly as they sat. That's how I found this place. Marco understands the importance of quiet spaces. Of course he'd researched that too, just like he'd researched how to interact with Luca, how to respect his routines. Milena unfolded her napkin, needing something to do with her hands. Why are you trying so hard? Because you're worth it. You don't know me. I know you work 2 jobs without complaining. I know you count to 30 when you need to calm down. Yes, I noticed that. I know you organize sugar packets by color when you're nervous, just like Luca organizes his cars by wheel size. I know you hide your smile behind your hand, like you're afraid to let people see it. He leaned forward slightly. I know you're brilliant at mental math, but pretend not to be because it makes your co-workers uncomfortable. I know you sleep about 4 hours a night, but never let exhaustion affect how you treat people. Stop, she whispered. I know you're terrified right now, not of me, but of this, of wanting something for yourself, of letting someone else carry even a small piece of your burden. You don't understand. I can't let myself depend on anyone. He shook his head. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me know you, really know you. The way you are when you're not hiding behind schedules and responsibilities. The waiter appeared with water, giving Milena a moment to compose herself. She took a sip, letting the cold liquid soothe her tight throat. My life is those schedules and responsibilities. They're not a mask I can just take off. I know that too. Rowan's eyes held hers. I'm not asking you to change anything. I'm asking if I can be part of it. All of it. The early mornings, the double shifts, the toy car measurements, the hard parts and the beautiful parts. Why? Because from the moment you hugged the wrong person in an airport, my perfectly ordered world stopped making sense. And for the first time in my life, I don't want it to make sense. I just want... What? You. Just as you are. Schedules, responsibilities, and all. The candle between them flickered, casting shadows that danced across his face. In its warm light, Milena could see the genuine emotion in his eyes, the slight tremor in his hand as he reached across the table. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, he said softly. We can just have dinner, talk, be ourselves. Be ourselves, as if it were that simple, as if herself wasn't split into 1,000 pieces, each one carefully measured and allocated to the tasks that kept her small world turning. But as she looked at him in the candlelight, she remembered how he'd sat on Mrs. Henderson's floor, measuring toy cars with the same care he probably used in corporate boardrooms, how he'd researched autism and quiet restaurants, and all the little details that made up her life. Okay, she said finally, uncurling her fingers from her napkin. Let's have dinner. His smile was worth every moment of terror that had preceded it. Okay. But I should warn you, the pasta here really is incredible. You might have to come back again just to try everything on the menu. Is that a threat or a promise? Both, he said, and the warmth in his voice wrapped around her like a blanket. Definitely both. As their waiter approached with menus, Milena found herself doing something dangerous. She began to hope, just a little, just enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, the woman in the borrowed dress deserved more than survival. She checked her phone quickly. 8:15 p.m. Luca would be finishing his documentary now, preparing for his bath routine, everything running exactly on schedule, except her heart, which had decided to beat to an entirely new rhythm. Sunday mornings belonged to Luca. It was their one unbreakable rule, the only time Milena never took shifts or made appointments. They had a routine, pancakes shaped like stars, documentary reruns, and quiet hours where Luca would draw while Milena caught up on bills. But this Sunday felt different. Your pancake has uneven points, Luca observed, studying his breakfast with mathematical precision. 3 millimeters off on the left side. I'm sorry, baby. Should I make another one? He considered this, head tilted. No. Imperfections can be interesting. Like the carman's watch. Milena's hand stilled over the griddle. What about his watch? It was 2 minutes fast, but he knew it was 2 minutes fast. He adjusted his measurements accordingly. Of course he had. Of course Rowan had noticed his watch's inaccuracy and explained it to Luca, just like he'd noticed everything else about their lives, fitting himself into their carefully structured world with a patience that made her chest ache. Her phone buzzed softly on the counter. She already knew who it was. Good morning. I keep smiling at nothing. People on the street probably think I'm crazy. Despite herself, Milena smiled too. Last night had been perfect. The quiet restaurant, the easy conversation, the way Rowan had listened, really listened, as she talked about her dreams of going back to school someday, of making a better life for Luca. He had driven her home exactly on schedule, getting her back for Luca's bedtime star count without a minute to spare. You are crazy, she typed back. Who smiles on a Sunday morning? People who had the best dinner of their lives last night. Another text followed quickly. Too much. I'm trying not to overwhelm you, but I'm not very good at hiding how I feel. The honesty of it made her breath catch. She glanced at Luca, who was now measuring his orange juice level with careful eyes. Sunday is Luca time, she replied. No distractions. I know. Family day. I respect that completely. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you. Both of you, both of you. Not many men included her son in their morning after texts. Then again, Rowan wasn't like many men. Mom? Luca's voice pulled her attention back. The calendar is wrong. She followed his pointing finger to the kitchen wall calendar. Someone, probably Mrs. Henderson, had marked the upcoming Friday with a bright red circle. Parent-teacher conference? Milena read, her stomach dropping. She'd completely forgotten. It's okay, baby. I'll request the morning off from the clinic. But even as she said it, she knew it would be a problem. Doctor. Stevens had already approved her taking Thursday morning off for Luca's dental appointment, asking for Friday too. Her phone buzzed again. If you need anything, even just a coffee delivery or a grocery run, I'm here. No pressure, no expectations, just here. Milena stared at the message until the letters blurred. It would be so easy to lean on him, to accept the help he so genuinely offered, but dependency was a slippery slope she couldn't afford to start down. Dear Mum. Luca's voice had taken on the slight edge that signaled rising anxiety. The calendar is wrong. I know, baby. We'll figure it out. No. Look, he pointed again, more insistently. The phases of the moon, they're incorrect. She looked closer. Sure enough, the calendar showed a full moon for next weekend when it should be a waning crescent. Such a small detail. But to Luca, these accuracies mattered deeply. Oh, you're right, she said, relieved to focus on a problem she could actually solve. Should we fix it? He nodded, already reaching for his special astronomy book, the one he used to track lunar phases. They spent the next hour carefully updating each month. Luca's tension easing as order was restored to his world. If only her own world could be fixed so easily. The rest of the morning passed in their usual Sunday rhythm, but Milena's mind kept drifting to the upcoming week's logistics. She'd have to dip into the emergency fund, again, to cover Mrs. Henderson's extra hours, maybe pick up an extra cafe shift to make up the difference, but that would mean less time with Luca, more disruption to his routine. Her phone lit up with a text from her clinic supervisor. Schedule change. Dr. Walsh called in sick. Need you to cover Thursday morning, the same time as Luca's dental appointment. The appointment they'd waited 3 months for, with the only pediatric dentist in town who specialized in autistic children. Milena's hands shook as she typed back, Please, I have my son's appointment. Sorry, no other coverage available. Dr. Stevens is at a conference. She closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. One more impossible choice in a life full of them. Her phone buzzed again. Rowan, I know it's Sunday family time, but I just drove past the most amazing telescope in a store window. Made me think of Luca. Would it be okay if I sent you a picture? Only if it won't disrupt anything. The thoughtfulness of it, asking permission before even sending a photo, made something inside her crack. Before she could stop herself, she hit the call button. He answered on the first ring. Hey, so I'm sorry if I... Do you really want to be part of this? She interrupted, her voice low so Luca wouldn't hear from the living room. All of it, the hard parts too. Yes. No hesitation, no qualification, just simple truth. I need... She swallowed hard. I need someone to take Luca to the dentist on Thursday morning. Mrs. Henderson can't do it, and I just got called into work, and it's a special appointment we can't reschedule, and what time? You don't even know if you're free. I'll make myself free. What time? She told him, adding quickly, but you have to understand, he needs exact routine. The appointment is at 10:15. You'd need to pick him up at exactly 9:47 to account for traffic. He'll want to sit in the back seat, left side only. He'll need his blue comfort bag with his headphones and, Milena, his voice was gentle, send me a detailed list. I'll follow it to the letter, I promise. Why are you doing this? Because I meant what I said last night. I want all of it. The schedules, the precise measurements, the hard choices, the beautiful moments, all of it. Through the doorway, she could see Luca in his usual Sunday spot, carefully drawing his weekly star chart. His face held the peaceful focus that came with doing something he loved. The telescope, she said finally. Show me the picture. She could hear Rowan's smile. Actually, what if I brought it by, later, after dinner? Only if it won't disrupt his routine. We could set it up on your balcony, make it part of the bedtime star count. Milena thought of her tiny apartment, so different from the world Rowan came from. Thought of all the reasons she should say no. The star count is at 9, she said instead. Don't be late. I wouldn't dare. I hear timing is everything in this family. Family. The word echoed in her chest like a bell. After they hung up, Milena stood in her small kitchen, looking at the calendar with its newly corrected moon phases, at her son, contentedly drawing stars, at the morning sunlight that somehow seemed brighter than usual. Mom, Luca called from the living room, can we add a new constellation to the chart tonight? She smiled, feeling the weight of impossible choices lift just a little. Yes, baby, I think tonight would be perfect for that, because maybe, just maybe, there was room in their carefully measured world for one more set of stars. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of 1,000 uncertainties. Milena had been awake since 3 a.m., reviewing the exhaustively detailed instructions she'd written for Rowan. 6 pages, color-coded, with timestamps for every potential scenario. Remember, baby, she knelt before Luca as he finished his precisely portioned breakfast. Today is different. Mr. Rowan will take you to Dr. Mason's office. Luca aligned his fork perfectly parallel to his empty plate. The carman. His ruler is accurate. Yes, he's very careful about measurements. She checked her phone, 9:39 a.m. He'll be here in exactly 8 minutes. 8 minutes is enough time to brush teeth following the correct pattern. Milena smiled, relief flooding her chest at his calm acceptance. The telescope visit on Sunday had helped enormously. Rowan had arrived at exactly 8:57 p.m., the professional-grade telescope carefully packed in his car. He'd let Luca inspect every piece, measuring and cataloging each component while explaining their functions with scientific precision. Her phone buzzed. 5 minutes away. Following the route you mapped exactly. Of course he was. He'd spent 2 hours yesterday driving the route at different times, calculating traffic patterns and potential delays, just like he'd visited the dentist's office in advance, photographing the waiting room so Luca could preview the space. At exactly 9:47 a.m., a soft knock echoed through the apartment. Luca looked up from his toothbrushing routine, eyes focused on the middle distance. 3 knocks, evenly spaced, 0.5 seconds apart. Milena opened the door to find Rowan in casual clothes, the same kind Luca's occupational therapist wore, holding a small bag. I brought something, he said quietly, but only if it won't disrupt his routine. It's a pocket star chart with precise measurements of constellations. I thought it might help during the appointment. The thoughtfulness made her throat tight. You can show him in the car, left back seat. I remember. He held up a printed copy of her instructions. I memorized everything, and I'll text you updates every 15 minutes. I'm sorry about all this. I know you probably had important meetings. Hey, his voice was soft but firm. Nothing is more important than this, than him, than you. Before she could respond, Luca emerged from the bathroom, blue comfort bag clutched to his chest. His eyes darted to Rowan, then away. Hello, Luca, Rowan said, maintaining the precise distance specified in Milena's notes. I brought something for you to measure later, if you'd like. But first, we should leave in exactly 2 minutes to maintain our schedule. Luca's shoulders relaxed slightly at the mention of schedules and measurements. He moved toward the door with careful steps, pausing to line up his shoes perfectly before putting them on. Mom, his voice was barely a whisper, you'll be here at 11:43? Yes, baby, I'll be waiting right here. And the stars tonight? Same as always. 9 o'clock? He nodded once, then walked to the car with measured steps, Rowan following at the exact distance Milena had specified. She watched from the window as Luca settled into his preferred seat. As Rowan checked the seatbelt with careful attention to pressure and angle, her phone buzzed. We're okay. He's looking at the star chart. Deep breaths, Mama. Milena pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting back tears as she watched them drive away. For 6 years, she'd done everything alone. Every doctor's appointment, every meltdown, every small victory and crushing setback. And now, the clinic was busy, but Milena's mind kept drifting to her phone, waiting for Rowan's updates. 9:58 a.m. Traffic light at Main Street was red. Adjusted route to maintain schedule. 10:07 a.m. Arrived at parking lot. Luca measuring parking space lines with pocket ruler. 10:13 a.m. In waiting room. Star chart helping with fluorescent lights. 10:22 a.m. Dr. Mason letting him inspect tools before starting. All measurements recorded in his notebook. 10:45 a.m. Cleaning complete. No distress. He's amazing, Milena. She was processing insurance forms when the final update came through, accompanied by a photo. Her hands shook as she opened it. There was Luca, sitting in the dentist's chair, actually smiling as he held up a small certificate. Below it, Rowan had written, "First cavity-free checkup. We celebrated by measuring the exact angle of the dentist's chair recline." Relief made her legs weak. She ducked into the break room, needing a moment to compose herself. But before she could, another text arrived. He asked if we could stop at the store to buy a protractor. Said his star charts need more precise angles. I know it's not in the schedule, but... Milena stared at the message, understanding the weight of what he was really asking. Any deviation from routine could trigger anxiety, could spiral into a meltdown, but Luca had asked, had actually verbalized a want. That alone was huge. "What does your gut tell you?" she typed back. He's calm, focused. The star chart kept him grounded through the appointment. I think he feels safe. Safe. The word every special needs parent dreams of hearing. "Okay," she replied, "but no more than 15 minutes in the store. Already mapped the shortest route to the checkout counter. We'll be home by 11:43. She returned to her desk, trying to focus on work, but her mind kept drifting to the image of her son, smiling in that dentist's chair, of Rowan Magazine who measured parking spaces and memorized schedules, and understood that love sometimes looked like precise angles and carefully counted seconds. At exactly 11:41 a.m., she heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. 2 sets, one careful and measured, one slightly longer, but deliberately matched to the first. "Mom!" Luca's voice held an excitement she rarely heard. "We found a protractor with digital display, accurate to 0.01 degrees. She turned to find them in the doorway, Luca clutching a small shopping bag, Rowan standing slightly behind him with an expression that held something deeper than pride. "The carman helped me calculate the optimal angle for Orion viewing," Luca continued, his words coming faster than usual. "Did you know that stellar parallax requires precise trigonometric functions?" "I didn't," she said softly, watching as her son, her beautiful, brilliant, often silent son, practically vibrated with enthusiasm. "Tell me more." Rowan caught her eye over Luca's head as the boy launched into a detailed explanation of astronomical measurements. His smile held no triumph, no pride in his accomplishment, only genuine joy at Luca's happiness. "I should go," he said, when Luca paused for breath. "Let you get back to work." "No?" The word surprised them both. "I mean, it's my lunch break. Maybe we could all get something if that wouldn't disrupt." "Lunch is at 12:15, Luca supplied. 31 minutes from now. Sufficient time to calculate stellar angles while waiting." Rowan's eyes never left Milena's face. "I'd like that, if you're sure." She wasn't sure about anything, except the way her son's hands moved with excitement as he talked about stars, and the way Rowan watched them both like they were the center of his universe. "I'm sure," she said softly. "After all, we need to verify those stellar parallax calculations, right?" Luca nodded seriously. "So multiple observers improve accuracy." "They do," Rowan agreed, and Milena heard the deeper meaning in his words. "They really do." As they walked to the cafe down the street, Milena watched her son measuring sidewalk cracks with his new protractor, while Rowan listened intently to each calculation. Something was shifting, changing, like the slow rotation of stars across the night sky, and for the first time in years, she didn't try to measure or control it. She just let it be, as vast and beautiful as the constellations Luca loved so much. The first sign of trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after the dental appointment. Milena was at her clinic desk when an email notification lit up her screen. From Lawrence, Ellison Ecotech Global. Com. Subject. Regarding my son's recent activities. Her stomach dropped. She'd known this moment would come. The moment when Rowan's world collided with hers in ways that couldn't be measured or controlled. Ems. Carter, I'll be direct. My son's recent behavior has become concerning. Missed board meetings, declined social engagements, time spent in questionable neighborhoods. I've had you investigated, of course. Single mother, 2 jobs, special needs child. I'm sure you understand how this appears. I'm prepared to offer compensation for your discretion and immediate withdrawal from my son's life. Please reply with your terms. Lawrence Ellison, CEO, Ecotech Global. The words blurred as tears threatened, not from the insult, but from the clinical precision of it. The way he'd listed her life circumstances like defects to be catalogued. Her phone buzzed with Rowan's daily morning message. Just remembered how you laughed at that terrible joke I told last night. Makes meetings bearable. They'd had dinner again, simple takeout in her apartment, while Luca measured the exact angles of paper airplanes Rowan taught him to fold. It had been perfect, normal, real. Another email notification, meeting reminder, parent-teacher conference, 2:30 p.m. Reality crashed back. She still hadn't found coverage for her clinic shift. Dr. Stevens was sympathetic but firm. They were short-staffed, and she'd already taken too much time off recently. Her phone lit up again. Everything okay? You usually send a laughing emoji to mock my jokes by now. Milena stared at the message, then at the email from Rowan's father. The contrast between them made her chest ache. Can't talk now, she typed back. Work. She turned off her phone, unable to bear his response. The morning crawled by in a haze of insurance forms and appointment scheduling. At lunch, she checked her messages. Miss you already. Found a new constellation chart Luca might like. Everything all right? You seem distant. Milena. And then, sent just minutes ago. I'm worried. Please talk to me. She was composing a reply when Dr. Stevens appeared at her desk. Milena, there's someone here to see you. Her heart stopped as she looked up, expecting Rowan. Instead, she found herself facing an elegantly dressed woman in her 50s, her silver hair swept into a perfect chignon. Ms. Carter. The woman's smile was practiced, professional. I'm Regina Ellison, Rowan's mother. Might we speak privately? The break room felt smaller than usual, its fluorescent lights harsh against Regina's expensive jewelry. She declined the offered chair, preferring to stand with perfect posture. I'll be brief, Regina said, her voice soft but steel-edged. You seem like a sensible woman. You must understand this. Dalliance cannot continue. Milena forced herself to meet the older woman's eyes. With all due respect, that's between Rowan and me. Is it? Regina's perfectly manicured fingers traced the edge of a nearby table. Tell me, how does your son handle change? Disruption to his routine? What happens when this inevitably ends badly? The question hit like a physical blow, because of course she'd thought about it. Of course she'd lain awake at night, terrified of what would happen to Luca when, not if, this fell apart. Rowan is a good man, Regina continued, almost gently. He means well, but he's lived a certain way his entire life. Board meetings, charity galas, social obligations. Do you really see yourself fitting into that world? More importantly, do you see your son surviving in it? You don't know anything about my son. I know he's autistic. I know routine is crucial for him. I know any disruption to his carefully ordered world could be devastating. She paused. I also know about the parent-teacher conference you're missing today, the one Rowan offered to attend in your place. Milena's head snapped up. How did you... We have resources, Ms. Carter. We protect our own. Regina's voice softened marginally. You seem like a good mother. You've built a stable life for your son. Why risk destabilizing it for a relationship that can't possibly last? Before Milena could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Henderson. Luca, very anxious about conference. Keeps checking clock. Need response about who's attending. Reality crashed in like a wave. In all the morning's chaos, she hadn't confirmed with Rowan about the conference, hadn't responded to his messages, hadn't done anything except let her carefully structured world start to unravel. Think about it, Regina said, moving toward the door. For everyone's sake. She left Milena standing in the break room, clutching her phone like a lifeline. Another message appeared. Rowan again. Just say the word, and I'll handle the conference. Already cleared my schedule. Trust me with this, please. Trust. Such a small word for such an impossible thing. Her fingers shook as she typed, I can't. I'm sorry. I just can't. She turned off her phone before his response came through. Then she did something she'd never done in 6 years of single motherhood. She broke down at work. Dr. Stevens found her 10 minutes later, still trying to pull herself together. One look at her face and he sighed. Go. What? Go to your son's conference. Family comes first. We'll manage. But you said... I know what I said. I also know that sometimes being a good boss means knowing when to break your own rules. He smiled kindly. Besides, you haven't taken a sick day in 3 years. Consider this one earned. Milena grabbed her purse with trembling hands. Thank you. I'll make up the hours. Go, he repeated firmly. Take care of your boy. She practically ran to her car, turning her phone back on as she started the engine. Messages flooded in. From Mrs. Henderson. Luca getting very anxious. Please advise. From Rowan. I don't know what happened, but I'm here. Whatever you need. From Rowan's father. I await your terms. And finally, from Rowan again. I love you. Both of you. Whatever's wrong, we'll figure it out together. Just let me in, love. Another small word for an impossible thing. She pulled into the school parking lot at 2:27 p.m., her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see Luca sitting in the conference room with his teacher, meticulously arranging and rearranging a set of pencils on the table. And there, in the parking space next to hers, was a familiar black car. Rowan stepped out slowly, his eyes finding hers through the windshield. He didn't approach, didn't pressure, just stood there, patient and steady, like he'd been from the start. I got an email from your father, she said when she finally got out of her car, and a visit from your mother. I know. His voice was tight with barely contained anger. I just found out. I'm so sorry. They're right, you know, about all of it. The worlds we come from, the impossibility of this, the risk to Luca. No, he took a single step forward. They're right about the challenges, but they're wrong about what matters. He glanced toward the conference room window. He matters. You matter. The rest is just noise. It's not that simple. Actually, it is. He smiled slightly. Sometimes the most precise measurements are the simplest ones, like the distance between two hearts, the angle of a smile, the exact moment someone realizes they can't imagine their life without someone else in it. Through the window, Milena could see Luca looking up, his eyes finding them in the parking lot, his fingers stilled on the pencils. We have exactly 2 minutes until the conference starts, Rowan said softly. Just enough time for you to decide if you trust me. Trust us. This little family we're building. One careful measurement at a time. Family. The word echoed in her chest like a constellation finding its place in the night sky. 1 minute, 30 seconds, she whispered. I'll wait, however long it takes. And in that moment, standing in a school parking lot while her son watched through the window and the world tried to tear them apart, Milena Carter did the bravest thing she'd ever done. She reached for Rowan's hand. Headlines weren't part of Milena's morning routine, but there it was, glaring from her phone screen as she waited for her 5:45 a.m. bus. Ellison Eyre steps down. Corporate dynasty in chaos. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the article. Words jumped out like accusations. Unprecedented, family tension, mysterious personal matters, stock prices dropping. You shouldn't read those. She looked up to find Rowan beside her at the bus stop, 2 coffee cups in hand. Steam rose from them in the early morning chill. What are you doing here? Bringing you coffee. He handed her a cup. And making sure you don't spiral into guilt over things that aren't your fault. You resigned from your family's company. I stepped back, temporarily. He leaned against the bus shelter. Told them I needed time to evaluate my priorities. They're spinning it into a crisis because that's what they do. A week had passed since the parent-teacher conference, since she'd chosen to take his hand in that parking lot. 7 days of headlines, of whispered gossip at the clinic, of Rowan's parents escalating their attempts to resolve the situation. Your father called the clinic yesterday, she said quietly. Tried to get Dr. Stevens to fire me. Rowan's jaw tightened. What happened? Dr. Stevens told him that harassing his employees was grounds for a lawsuit. A small smile touched her lips. Then he gave me a raise. Smart man, Rowan sipped his coffee. Unlike my father, who seems determined to prove exactly why I needed to step back. The 5:45 bus appeared at the corner, right on schedule. Milena moved to board, but Rowan caught her hand. "Let me drive you. I can't start depending on rides." "What happens when—" She stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. "When what?" His voice was gentle. "When I leave, when this falls apart. Is that what you're worried about?" Before she could respond, her phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Henderson. "Luca asking about dinner schedule. Need to confirm changes." Right, dinner. Because somehow, without any formal discussion, Rowan had become a regular part of their evening routine. 3 nights a week, he'd arrive at exactly 6:15 p.m. with groceries and his well-worn briefcase full of star charts and mathematical puzzles for Luca. "I should stick to the bus," she said finally. "Keep things stable." "Okay." No argument, no pressure, just acceptance. "I'll see you at 6:15. She nodded, boarding the bus with a strange ache in her chest. Through the window, she watched him stand there, still holding his coffee, until the bus turned the corner. The clinic was unusually busy, filled with flu season casualties and insurance renewals. Milena processed paperwork mechanically, trying not to notice the way some patients whispered when they saw her, how they'd clearly connected her to the headlines. At lunch, she found an envelope on her desk. Inside was a check for an amount that made her dizzy, along with a note in elegant handwriting. "Let's make this simple. Name your price. We all want what's best for Luca, don't we? Regina Ellison." Milena stared at the check until the numbers blurred. The amount would cover Luca's therapy for a year, could start a college fund, could— Everything okay? She looked up to find Dr. Stevens in the doorway, his kind face concerned. She held up the check helplessly. "I don't know what to do." He sat in the chair across from her desk. "Want to know what I think? Please. I think you're scared. Not of them, but of hoping, of believing you deserve something good." He smiled gently. "I've watched you for 3 years, Milena, working doubles, never complaining, building a life for your son brick by brick. But lately you smile more, you stand straighter. And Luca, he's talking to other patients in the waiting room, actually talking. That's what terrifies me," she whispered. "What if it all goes away? What if it doesn't?" Her phone buzzed, a text from Rowan. "Just had an idea for tonight's star measurement project. Think Luca might be ready to learn about parallax equations." Attached was a photo of carefully drawn diagrams, mathematical formulas broken down into simple steps. He'd clearly spent his morning preparing this, even with his company in chaos and his family in revolt. "You know, Doctor," Stevens said, watching her face soften as she looked at the photo, "sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let ourselves be happy." Another text appeared, also, "Made reservations at that quiet Italian place you liked. Saturday night. Mrs. H already agreed to watch Luca. Say yes." "I don't know how to do this," Milena admitted. "How to trust it." "Sure you do." Dr. Stevens stood, patting her shoulder. "Try one careful measurement at a time." The rest of the day passed in a blur of patients and paperwork. At exactly 6:13 p.m., Milena arrived home to find Rowan already in her parking lot, leaning against his car with grocery bags at his feet. "You're early," she said. "Actually, I've been here since 6:05, waiting to be exactly on time." He smiled that smile that still made her heart skip. "I didn't want to disrupt the schedule. Something about that, about this powerful man deliberately waiting in a parking lot to maintain her son's routine, made her reach for the envelope in her purse. "Your mother left this for me." She handed him the check. "Quite generous, isn't it?" Rowan looked at the amount, his jaw tightening, but before he could speak, the sound of running feet interrupted them. "Mom!" "Come on!" Luca's voice carried across the parking lot as he burst out of Mrs. Henderson's apartment. "It's 6:14! Time for parallax equations!" They turned to find him hurrying toward them, his movements still careful, but energized with excitement. He clutched his special notebook and calculator, ready for the evening's lessons. "Look what I brought," Rowan said, reaching into one of the grocery bags. "Special grid paper for plotting stellar coordinates. And I thought we could make space-themed pizza while we work on the math, with precisely measured toppings," Luca asked hopefully. "Is there any other way?" Milena watched them head inside, Luca already launching into a detailed explanation of his latest astronomical calculations. The envelope with the check was still in her hand. Looking down at it, she suddenly knew exactly what to do. Later that night, after Luca was asleep and Rowan had gone home, Milena sat at her small kitchen table and composed an email. Dear Mrs. Ellison, thank you for your generous offer. You're right. We all want what's best for Luca. That's why I'm returning your check. You see, my son is teaching me something important. The most valuable measurements aren't the ones we make with money. They're the ones we make with our hearts. Sincerely, Milena Carter. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. Then she opened her phone's camera roll, looking at the photos from dinner. Luca and Rowan bent over mathematical formulas, pizza abandoned as they lost themselves in calculations. Her son's face alive with joy, Rowan's eyes soft with love for them both. Some things, she was learning, couldn't be measured in dollars or social status or corporate dynasties. Some things could only be measured in moments like these, in carefully counted seconds, in the angle of a smile, in the quiet space between heartbeats where love took root and grew. Her phone lit up with one last message from Rowan. Thank you for tonight, for everything, for showing me what really matters. She looked at the empty envelope on her table, then at the message glowing on her screen, at the star charts scattered across her counter, and the pizza crumbs that would need to be cleaned up before morning. And for the first time, she didn't feel the need to measure or calculate or control what was happening. She just let herself feel it. All of it. Thank you, she typed back, for teaching us that love doesn't always need precise measurements. His response came instantly, but it helps when you have a good ruler and a better heart. Milena smiled, touching the words on her screen, because maybe that was the real measurement that mattered. Not the distance between their worlds, but the way their hearts had learned to beat in sync, creating a rhythm as steady and true as the stars Luca loved to count. The invitation arrived on heavy cream cardstock, delivered to Milena's clinic desk by personal courier. Gold lettering caught the fluorescent light as she opened the envelope. You are cordially invited to attend the annual Ecotech Global Charity Gala tonight at 7 p.m. the Grand Maxwell Hotel. A handwritten note was paperclipped to the corner in Rowan's distinctive script. I know it's last minute. I know it's not our usual routine, but I need you there. Both of you. Please. Milena's hands trembled. Tonight was Thursday, pizza and star charts night. Luca had been talking about it all week, excited to show Rowan his new constellation calculations. Her phone buzzed. Before you say no, I've thought it through. The hotel has a private observation deck. Luca can set up his telescope there, better view than your balcony. And the kitchen agreed to make his pizza exactly the way he likes it. Please trust me with this. Another text followed quickly. It's time to stop hiding. To show my family and the whole board exactly why I stepped down, what really matters. Everything okay? She looked up to find Dr. Stevens watching her with concern. Rowan wants us to attend the corporate gala tonight. She showed him the invitation. His father's making a big announcement, something about the future of the company. Ah, Dr. Stevens sat on the edge of her desk. And you're scared, terrified. She traced the gold lettering with one finger. Luca doesn't do well with crowds, or changes, or having his whole world shift. Yeah, he smiled gently. Like he did when Rowan first came into your lives. Sometimes the scariest changes turn out to be the best ones. Her phone lit up again. Mrs. Henderson this time. Luca's teacher called. He spoke up in class today. Actually raised his hand and explained parallax to the whole room. Attached was a photo. Luca at the whiteboard, carefully drawing the same stellar diagrams Rowan had taught him. His face held the focused excitement they were seeing more and more lately. Go, Dr. Stevens said softly. Take the afternoon off. Get ready. Face whatever's coming. But the Anderson file will be here tomorrow. He squeezed her shoulder. Some things are more important than paperwork. 2 hours later, Milena stood in her bedroom staring at her reflection. The dress had arrived shortly after the invitation, a deep blue silk that reminded her of the night sky. It fit perfectly, of course. Rowan would have made sure of that. Mom, Luca's voice drew her attention to the doorway. The angular displacement is incorrect. She turned to find him frowning at her dress. Huh? What do you mean, baby? The hem. He pointed with precise movements. It's 0.3 degrees off horizontal. The car man wouldn't like that. A laugh bubbled up in her throat. Of course, her son would notice the slightest imperfection in measurement. Should we fix it? He nodded seriously, already reaching for his ruler. They spent the next 15 minutes adjusting the hem while Luca calculated exact angles. By the time Mrs. Henderson arrived to help them get ready, the dress was mathematically perfect. Look what else came, Mrs. Henderson said. holding up a garment bag. Inside was a small suit in Luca's favorite shade of blue, with subtle silver pinstripes that caught the light like stars. The measurements are exact, Luca observed, inspecting the seams, like the carman's rulers. Yes, baby, exactly like that. A text lit up her phone. Car will be there at 6:45. Everything's ready on the observation deck. You can do this, we can do this. At exactly 6:45, a sleek black car pulled up outside, but instead of a driver, it was Rowan who stepped out, wearing a tuxedo that made Milena's breath catch. The angles of your collar are precise, Luca informed him seriously. I measured them specially. Rowan knelt to Luca's level. I have something for you. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a silver tie clip shaped like a constellation. It's Orion, your favorite. Luca's fingers traced the pattern with careful movements. The distances between stars are astronomically accurate. Of course they are. Rowan's voice was soft. I would never give you incorrect measurements. Something about those words, about the way he understood exactly what mattered to her son, made Milena's eyes fill with tears. Hey, he said, standing to face her. We don't have to do this. Yes, she whispered. We do. The drive to the hotel was quiet, filled with the soft sounds of Luca measuring his tie clip with a pocket ruler. Milena watched the city lights blur past, each one bringing them closer to a world she'd never thought she'd enter. There will be cameras, Rowan said finally. Reporters. My father's probably planned some kind of public statement. I know. We can still turn around. She reached for his hand. No, we can't. Because she understood now what he was really doing. This wasn't just about facing his family or the board. This was about claiming them, publicly and permanently, about drawing a line between his old life and whatever future they were building together. The hotel lobby was a sea of designer dresses and camera flashes. Milena felt Luca tense beside her as the noise and movement threatened to overwhelm him. Remember the deck, Rowan said quietly. Your telescope is already set up. We just have to get through the lobby. They moved through the crowd carefully, Rowan's hand steady on Luca's shoulder, guiding him through the chaos. Milena heard the whispers, saw the phones recording their progress. Tomorrow's headlines were already writing themselves. And then, cutting through the crowd like an Arctic wind, came Regina Ellison's voice. Rowan, a word. They turned to find his parents approaching, his mother elegant in diamonds, his father's face tight with barely controlled anger. Not now, Rowan said firmly. Yes, now. Lawrence Ellison stepped forward. Before you completely destroy everything we've built, everything you were meant to be. Luca's hands began to move faster, tracking invisible patterns in the air, his first sign of distress. Milena started to reach for him, but Rowan was already there, kneeling again to meet her son's eyes. Hey, he said softly. Want to know a secret about this room? Luca's fingers stilled slightly. Look up. Rowan pointed to the grand chandelier. See how the crystals are arranged. It's the same pattern as the Pleiades cluster. 7 points of light, with exactly 60 degrees of separation. Slowly, Luca's gaze lifted to the ceiling. His breathing steadied as he began to calculate angles, finding order in the chaos. This is exactly what we mean, Regina hissed. You're the heir to a corporate empire, and you're on your knees talking about star patterns. No, Rowan said, still focused on Luca. I'm on my knees talking to my family. The word fell like a stone into silence. Around them, phones recorded every moment, every word. You don't mean that, Lawrence said quietly. You can't. Actually, Dad, I do. Rowan stood, keeping one hand gentle on Luca's shoulder. And tonight, in front of the board and all your carefully chosen witnesses, I'm going to explain exactly why. Milena watched the emotions play across his parents' faces. Shock, anger, calculation. She saw the moment they realized how many phones were recording, how public this confrontation had become. Perhaps, Regina said finally, her social mask slipping back into place, we should continue this discussion privately. No, Rowan's voice was firm. No more private discussions, no more negotiations, no more trying to buy or threaten what matters most to me. He looked at Milena, then at Luca, who was still calculating chandelier angles. Yeah, this is my family now, my future, my choice. Lawrence stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. If you do this, if you throw away everything we've built, don't expect to ever come back. I'm not throwing anything away. Rowan smiled slightly. I'm building something better, something real. He squeezed Luca's shoulder gently. Ready to see your telescope, buddy? Luca nodded, his calculations complete. The chandelier is 0.02 degrees off center. We'll send them a strongly worded letter about their measurements, Rowan promised, making Milena's heart squeeze with love for them both. As they walked away, leaving his parents surrounded by whispers and camera phones, Rowan reached for Milena's hand. Thank you, he whispered, for trusting me with this, with everything. She interlaced their fingers, feeling the steady strength of him. Thank you for making it worth the risk. Above them, the chandelier's crystals caught the light, scattering it like stars across the marble floor. Milena watched her son's face as he tracked each point of light, finding patterns in their dance. Watched Rowan watching him, love evident in every careful movement, and she realized that some measurements couldn't be calculated with rulers or protractors. Some things could only be measured in the space between heartbeats, in the quiet moments between chaos, in the brave choices that changed everything. Tonight, surrounded by cameras and whispers and judgment, they would face whatever came next, together, as a family. But first, they had stars to count. 1 month after the gala, Milena stood in her small kitchen, surrounded by moving boxes and measuring tape. Morning sunlight streamed through the window, catching the diamond ring she still wasn't used to wearing. Simple, elegant, with tiny stars engraved inside the band. Mom? Luca's voice drifted from his bedroom. These measurements are incorrect. She found him frowning at a stack of boxes, ruler in hand. What's wrong, baby? The volume calculations don't account for book weight distribution. We need to recalibrate. I think you're right. Rowan appeared in the doorway, his usually pristine clothes dusty from packing. Want to help me work out the correct formula? Luca nodded seriously, already reaching for his notebook. 1 month hadn't changed his need for precision, but it had changed how he handled disruptions. Now, instead of panicking when measurements were wrong, he solved the problem methodically. Together, Milena watched them bend over the calculations, Rowan patient and focused, as Luca explained his theories about mass distribution. The sight still made her heart squeeze. This powerful CEO, who'd walked away from his empire to sit on bedroom floors and measure moving boxes. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Stevens. Everything okay with the move? Need any help? We're good, she typed back. Luca's supervising the box measurements. Of course he is. Oh, and the board position paperwork came through. Congratulations, Director of Patient Services. She smiled, remembering his face when he'd offered her the promotion. We need someone who understands both healthcare and special needs families, he'd said. Someone who can help us serve patients like Luca better. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made her look up. Mrs. Henderson appeared, carrying a casserole dish. Thought you could use lunch. How's the packing going? Ask the geometry team, Milena laughed, gesturing to where Rowan and Luca were now measuring box corners with digital protractors. Still can't believe you're leaving me. Mrs. Henderson's eyes misted slightly. Who's going to bring me late-night coffee and tell me about constellations? We're only moving 10 minutes away, Milena reminded her, and you're still our official backup childcare, unless you're too busy with that new grandbaby coming. Never too busy for my favorite boys. She set down the casserole, though I suppose they have each other now. They did. The thought still amazed Milena, how naturally Rowan had fit himself into their lives, how completely he'd embraced their routines and requirements. He'd found a house that perfectly balanced everyone's needs, close enough to keep Luca's school and therapy schedule, with a dedicated observatory room and a kitchen designed for their Thursday pizza-making traditions. Mom, Luca appeared beside her, clutching his notebook. We solved the volume distribution equation, but we need more boxes. Exactly 3 more, with reinforced corners. Already got them. Rowan held up his phone. They'll be here in 27 minutes. I ordered the same brand as the others, same dimensions. Luca's shoulders relaxed at this confirmation of consistency. Good. Then we can maintain optimal stack alignment. Speaking of alignment, Rowan said carefully, I was thinking about dinner tonight, since it's Thursday. Pizza night, Luca finished. But the kitchen is packed, true. But remember that Italian restaurant, the quiet one with the precise measurements. Milena held her breath. They hadn't been back to Marco's since their first date, hadn't tested Luca with that kind of change. The one with the living wall, Luca asked, where the owner's son likes patterns. That's right, Marco asked about you. Said his son wants to show you their new geometric herb garden. Luca considered this, fingers moving in familiar patterns. What time? 6:15, Rowan said. Same as always, and we can measure the herb patterns. Brought my special ruler just for that. Milena watched the conversation with tears threatening. A year ago, this kind of deviation from routine would have been impossible, but Rowan had taught them both that some changes could be beautiful, if measured carefully enough. Okay, Luca decided, but we need to finish the box calculations first. Deal. Rowan's smile was gentle. So I want to help me measure the moving truck capacity while your mum takes a break. Milena started to protest, but Mrs. Henderson touched her arm. Let them handle it. Come have tea with me. One last time in my kitchen. An hour later, sitting in Mrs. Henderson's familiar apartment, Milena watched through the window as Rowan and Luca calculated truck dimensions. Her son's movements were excited, engaged, as he explained something about cubic feet and load distribution. Yes, you know, Mrs. Henderson said softly, I used to worry about you two, a single mum working herself to exhaustion, a special little boy who needed so much. But now, she smiled, now I just see a family, complete. I was so scared, Milena admitted, of letting someone in, of disrupting Luca's world, of hoping. And now, before she could answer, a commotion outside drew their attention. A sleek black car had pulled into the parking lot, one Milena recognized. Regina Ellison stepped out, looking as elegant as ever, but something was different about her posture, less rigid somehow. She carried a large package wrapped in silver paper. Through the window, Milena watched Rowan step protectively in front of Luca, but Regina held up her hands in a gesture of peace. I should go down, Milena said, standing. Want backup? No. We need to handle this ourselves. By the time she reached the parking lot, Regina was speaking softly to Rowan while Luca continued his measurements, carefully ignoring the disruption. Understand if you don't want it, Regina was saying, but when I saw it, I thought of him. She held out the package. Rowan took it warily, then called, Hey, buddy, want to help me measure something? Luca looked up, assessed the situation, then approached with his ruler ready. Together, they carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a professional-grade telescope, smaller than Rowan's, but with incredibly precise digital controls. It's calibrated to 0.001 degree accuracy, Regina said quietly. I did some research about astronomy and autism and family. Luca was already examining the telescope's mechanisms, his fingers moving over the controls with familiar precision. Just the declination adjustment is exact, he announced, like Carman's rulers. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Regina said, watching him, or even acceptance. I wanted you to know I'm trying to understand. Milena saw the emotion cross Rowan's face, hope warring with caution, love battling hurt. Before he could respond, Luca spoke again. The angle is wrong. They all turned to him. What angle, baby? Milena asked, her shoulders too tense, like the chandelier that night, 0.02 degrees off. A startled laugh escaped Regina, perhaps her first real laugh in years. He's right. I am tense, scared, actually, of making more mistakes, of losing my son completely. Mom, Rowan's voice was soft. No, let me finish. I've spent my life measuring success in dollars and social status, but watching you these past months, the way you love them, the way you've built something real. She straightened her shoulders, correcting the angle Luca had noted. I'd like to learn your kind of measurements, if you'll teach me. Milena held her breath, watching Rowan struggle with the weight of history and hope. But it was Luca who answered. We have pizza tonight, at the restaurant with the herb garden. 6:15. He didn't look up from the telescope. The measurements there are usually accurate. The invitation, delivered in his precise, matter-of-fact way, brought tears to Regina's eyes. I would like that, very much. But no diamonds, he added firmly. They refract light, disrupt astronomical observations. This time, Regina's laugh was real and warm. I promise. No diamonds. She turned to Milena. And no more interference. No more judgment. Just a chance to learn. To be part of this, however you'll let me. Milena looked at Rowan, letting him make this choice. He nodded slowly. 6:15, he said. Don't be late. Luca takes his scheduling very seriously. I'm learning that accuracy matters, Regina said softly, in all the important things. After she left, they stood in the parking lot, surrounded by moving boxes and new telescopes and the weight of moments that changed everything. You okay? Milena asked Rowan. He pulled her close, watching Luca adjust the telescope's settings. Yeah, I think I am. We all are, because that's what family meant. She was learning. Not perfect measurements or flawless angles, but the willingness to keep trying, to adjust and recalculate and make space for love in all its imperfect forms. Mum, Luca called. The moving truck's volume coefficients need revision. Coming, baby. She squeezed Rowan's hand. Far ready to do some measuring. His smile was as bright as the stars they'd learned to count together. Always. And so, surrounded by boxes and calculations and the endless possibilities of love, they began again, together, measuring each moment, each joy, each challenge with the tools they'd built as a family, one careful angle at a time. Epilogue. The geometry of love. 1 year later. The observatory room's dome opened silently to the summer night sky, revealing a canvas of stars that seemed close enough to touch. Luca stood at his telescope, the one Regina had given him, now upgraded with even more precise digital controls, carefully adjusting the coordinates. 0.003 degrees west, he announced. The alignment is optimal. Perfect timing. Rowan entered with 3 hot chocolates on a tray, each mug measured to exactly the same level. Your mum's on her way up. You ready to show her? Luca nodded, double-checking his calculations in the notebook that now contained a year's worth of astronomical observations. His hands moved with confidence as he made final adjustments, no longer needing anyone to verify his measurements. Footsteps on the stairs announced Milena's arrival. She'd changed out of her clinic director's suit into comfortable clothes, her engagement ring catching starlight as she accepted her hot chocolate. Sorry I'm late, she said. Board meeting ran over. You're not late, Luca corrected without looking up from his telescope. Asked 9.7 minutes until optimal viewing angle. He's been tracking the convergence for weeks, Rowan explained, sliding an arm around her waist. Wouldn't even tell me what he's found. They waited in comfortable silence while Luca completed his preparations. Through the observatory's windows, they could see the lights of their neighborhood, the garden where they still made Thursday night pizzas, the path to Mrs. Henderson's new house just 2 streets over. They're ready, Luca announced finally. Mum first. Milena approached the telescope, following his precise instructions for eye position and focus. Through the lens, she saw a cluster of stars arranged in an unfamiliar pattern. What am I looking at, baby? A new constellation. His voice held the excitement that now came more frequently, more naturally. I discovered it 3 weeks ago. Been calculating its position every night. He's been very secretive about it, Rowan added. Wouldn't even let his grandmother help with the measurements when she visited yesterday. The mention of Regina brought a smile to Milena's face. The weekly dinners with Rowan's mother had become surprisingly pleasant, filled with stories and star charts, and Regina's earnest attempts to understand their world. Look at the star pattern, Luca directed. What do you see? Milena adjusted the focus slightly. The stars seemed to form a shape. Is that a heart? Luca confirmed. But not a standard symmetrical heart. This one's real, imperfect. Like the carman says, love should be. Tears filled Milena's eyes as she straightened. Oh, baby. The angles aren't standard, he continued, his fingers moving in excited patterns. They vary by 0.004 degrees from traditional heart iconography, but that makes them better, more accurate to actual emotional geometry. Emotional geometry? Rowan's voice was soft with wonder. Yes, like us. Luca made a minor adjustment to the telescope's position. Not perfect angles, but perfect anyway. Milena watched as her son showed Rowan the constellation, explaining the mathematical principles behind its discovery. Her brilliant, beautiful boy, who once struggled to speak, now gave detailed lectures about stellar cartography. Who once feared any deviation from routine, now helped design new family traditions. She thought of all the measurements that had brought them here, the precise angles of morning routines, the careful calculations of change and growth, the infinite variables of learning to love and trust and hope. I submitted it for official registration, Luca announced. To the International Astronomical Union. You did? Rowan's voice cracked slightly. When? Last week. Grandmother helped with the paperwork. He shuffled through his notebook. I named it. What did you name it, baby? Milena asked softly. Familia Mensura. He pronounced the Latin carefully. It means family of measurements, Rowan translated, his eyes shining. Yes. Luca turned back to his telescope. Because that's what we are. Different angles, different calculations, but making patterns together. Milena felt Rowan's arms slide around her as they watched their son map his stars. Through the dome's opening, the night sky stretched endless and beautiful, full of new constellations waiting to be discovered. 0.004 degrees, she whispered, leaning into her husband's embrace. The variance he mentioned, in the heart's angles. She smiled. It turns out love doesn't need perfect measurements after all. No, Rowan agreed softly, watching Luca add another precise note to his calculations. But it helps to have someone who knows how to measure what matters. Above them, the stars of Familia Mensura glittered like diamonds in the velvet sky, a testament to the geometry of their love, the mathematics of their family, the precise calculations that had brought them all home, not to the perfect life they'd once imagined, to the beautifully imperfect one they'd built together, measured in love, infinite degrees of joy. Your opinion matters. What did you learn from this story? Have you ever had to measure love in unexpected ways? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.